My sister erased me from her wedding with a single text message. I did not scream, I did not cry. I just silently booked a first-class flight to Hawaii. A week later, as I sat sipping my morning coffee overlooking the Pacific Ocean, her perfect dream day crashed and burned. I watched my phone light up with 115 missed calls. If you have ever been treated like a second-class citizen by your own blood, stick around and subscribe because you will want to hear exactly how I let the trash take itself out. I am Jada, and I am 35 years old. Until that Tuesday afternoon, I genuinely believed that family meant unconditional love. I was sitting in my home office going over quarterly projections when my phone chimed. It was a message from my younger sister, Chloe, just 10 days before she was set to marry Julian. Julian came from a prominent white family in New England, the kind of family with generational wealth and names on library buildings. Chloe had spent the last 2 years contorting herself into someone she thought they would accept, straightening her hair, changing her wardrobe, and adopting a painfully fake accent. The text message glared at me from the screen. Jada, Julian's parents are paying for half the reception, and his extended family is very traditional. Your natural hair, your loud style, and your thick vibe just do not fit the elegant aesthetic we are going for. I am uninviting you. Do not cause a scene. It is my special day. I sat frozen in my leather chair. The words were a physical blow, not just because I was being excluded from my only sister's wedding, but because of the deep toxic colorism embedded in every single syllable. Growing up, my parents had always elevated Chloe. Her lighter complexion and proximity to what they considered acceptable standard beauty made her the golden child. I was darker, I wore my hair in thick natural locks, and I spoke my mind. I was constantly told to tone it down, to be less loud, and to make myself smaller. My hands shook, but I picked up my phone and dialed my mother, Vivica. I needed someone to tell me this was a sick joke. When she answered, the background noise of a bridal boutique echoed through the speaker. "Mom," I said, my voice tight. "Chloe just uninvited me from the wedding because of my hair and my body. Please tell me you are not letting her do this." My mother sighed heavily, a sound of pure irritation. "Jada, stop being so difficult and loud. Chloe just wants perfection for her big day. You always wear those bold prints and you take up too much space. Julian's family is very conservative. Let your sister have her upscale moment. Just stay home and do not make this about you." Before I could even process the betrayal, I heard my father, Calvin, chime in on speakerphone. "Jada, listen to your mother. We are trying to make a good impression on Julian's relatives. We cannot have you showing up looking militant and making them uncomfortable about our background. Be the bigger person for once." The line went silent for a moment. They were waiting for me to argue, to beg, to defend my humanity to the people who brought me into this world. I realized then that they were ashamed of me. They were ashamed of the very blackness they passed down to me. They wanted to hide me away like a dirty secret so they could play dress-up with Julian's wealthy New England relatives. "Okay," I said softly, "have a beautiful wedding." I hung up the phone. I did not shed a single tear. Tears were for people who still had hope, and in that moment every ounce of hope I had for my family evaporated. I did not draft an angry paragraph. I did not post on social media. Instead, I opened my laptop and navigated to a travel website. I booked a first-class one-way ticket to Maui for the exact dates of the wedding weekend. Then I opened a second tab on my browser. This was a highly secured corporate financial portal. You see, my family had spent years mocking my career. When I started out, they called my work little freelance gigs. They thought I was struggling to pay rent. They had absolutely no idea that over the past decade I had built an empire. I was not a struggling freelancer. I was the chief executive officer and silent majority owner of Onyx Hospitality, an elite real estate investment group. And Onyx Hospitality happened to own the sprawling luxury estate where Chloe and Julian were getting married. 6 months ago, my mother and sister had walked into that venue and begged the manager for a massive discount. They cried about budget issues, completely hiding their financial ruin from Julian and his wealthy parents. They wanted a champagne wedding on a tap water budget. When the venue director informed me of their situation, I felt a surge of familial loyalty. I wanted to protect their pride. I quietly stepped in as the anonymous corporate guarantor, covering the $150,000 venue and catering costs entirely out of my own pocket. I paid for the hydrangeas, I paid for the Wagyu beef, I paid for the crystal chandeliers. I was literally buying them the aesthetic they were now using to exclude me. I sat back in my chair and looked at the wedding invitation pinned to my bulletin board. They thought I was socially unfit to attend their elegant affair. I decided that if my natural hair and my loud aesthetic were not welcome at their celebration, then my quiet money should not be welcome either. My phone vibrated against the polished mahogany of my desk, breaking the heavy silence in my office. I looked down at the glowing screen. Vivica was calling back. I knew exactly why she was calling. She needed to ensure I was thoroughly subdued. She needed to guarantee that her darkest daughter would not suddenly show up and shatter the pristine country club illusion she and Chloe had meticulously built for Julian and his relatives. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting it ring twice before I finally answered. "Jada, are you still there?" Vivica asked. Her tone was no longer irritated. It was patronizingly sweet. It was the careful, measured voice she used whenever she was trying to manage a volatile situation. "I just want to make sure you truly understand where we are coming from. Julian comes from old money. His family summers in Martha Vineyard. They have very specific expectations about the company they keep. Your sister has worked so hard to assimilate into their world and build this relationship. You have to admit your vibe is just a bit too aggressive for that kind of upscale crowd." I stayed perfectly silent. The quiet on my end prompted my father to speak up from the background. "Listen to your mother, Jada," Calvin said, his voice carrying that familiar heavy authority. "We are not saying there is anything wrong with you. We are just saying you need to read the room. Chloe has a real chance to secure a future that elevates this entire family. You showing up with your natural locks and your bright, bold colors just sends the wrong message. We do not want them thinking we are some loud, unrefined people from the neighborhood. You are 35 years old. You should understand how society works by now." It was the exact same script they had been reading to me since I was a little girl. Whenever relatives or family friends came over, Chloe was paraded around the living room. Her lighter skin and looser curls were constantly praised. She was delicate. She was the prize. I was the strong one, the independent one, the one who needed to step aside and make room for her to shine. I remembered being 16 and wearing my hair in braids for the first time. My father told me I looked like a hoodlum. My mother told me I would never land a professional job looking like that. They had absolutely no idea that the very unapologetic nature they despised was the fuel for my ambition. It was the exact reason I built Onyx Hospitality from the ground up while they were busy maxing out their credit cards to maintain the illusion of wealth. They thought I was a struggling consultant, barely scraping by. They thought my life was small because I did not brag about designer labels or lease luxury cars I could not afford. "I understand completely, Dad," I said. My voice was incredibly smooth, completely devoid of the anger they were so desperately waiting to hear. "You want to present a certain polished image to Julian and his parents. You do not want any reminders of who you actually are to spoil the aesthetic. I promise you I will not be at the wedding. In fact, I will be thousands of miles away." "That is my mature girl," Vivica sighed, sounding incredibly relieved. "We will bring you back a slice of wedding cake. Maybe we can get lunch next month, just the two of us, once all this wedding stress blows over. Chloe is just high-strung right now. You know how brides get." "I know exactly how she gets," I replied. "Have a wonderful time entertaining your new guests." I disconnected the call and tossed my phone onto the desk. There was no explosive argument. There were no tears streaming down my face. I was completely done watering myself down for people who only wanted me around when I was making them look good. They wanted me invisible. I was about to give them exactly what they asked for, but it was going to come with a price tag they could never afford. I turned my attention back to my laptop screen. I opened a new tab and navigated to my preferred travel portal. I did not just book any ticket. I booked a first-class direct flight to Maui, departing in exactly 48 hours. I selected a luxury oceanfront suite at one of the most exclusive resorts on the island. If I was going to be excluded from a major family milestone, I was going to spend that time treating myself to the luxury I had rightfully earned. I paid for the trip in full and printed my itinerary. My mind shifted back to the business at hand. Onyx Hospitality was not just a side project. It was a massive corporate entity that I controlled with absolute authority. My business partner Kendra and I had acquired the very estate Chloe had booked over a year ago. It was the crown jewel of our real estate portfolio. When Chloe first announced she wanted her reception there, my mother had complained about the outrageous cost. They had no idea the owner was standing right in front of them. I had watched Vivica stress over the massive deposit. Against Kendra's professional advice, I had quietly logged into the corporate system and applied an anonymous sponsor override. I became the financial guarantor for their entire $150,000 contract. I did it because despite everything, they were my family. I wanted Chloe to have the beautiful day she dreamed of. I wanted to use my success to bless them from the shadows. But loyalty is a two-way street, and they had just bulldozed right over mine. I walked over to my bedroom closet and pulled out my largest travel suitcase. I began packing my boldest, brightest dresses. I packed my favorite vibrant swimsuits. I packed every single clothing item they deemed too loud and too aggressive for their refined tastes. Every piece of fabric I folded felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my dignity. As I zipped the suitcase closed, I thought about Julian. He seemed like a decent man, quiet, polite, and completely unaware of the toxic dynamics running rampant through his future wife's family. He thought he was marrying into a sophisticated, progressive household. Chloe had clearly fed him a fabricated narrative about who we were, and specifically about who I was, to justify keeping me away. She had weaponized his family's race to excuse her own internalized hatred. I dragged my suitcase toward the front door. The wedding was just 10 days away. The venue contract clearly stated that any event operating under a corporate sponsorship could be subjected to a full balance demand if the sponsor withdrew. Without my silent backing, Vivica and Chloe were entirely responsible for a six-figure bill they had absolutely no way of paying. They wanted a picture-perfect wedding without me. They were about to find out exactly how much my absence was going to cost them. The heavy scent of roasted nuts and expensive espresso drifted through the first-class lounge at the airport. I bypassed the crowded seating areas and found a quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the baggage handlers load the plane that would take me across the ocean. My phone felt heavy in my hand, but my mind had never been clearer. I dialed the private line of my business partner, Kendra. Kendra answered on the second ring. The background noise of our corporate headquarters hummed behind her voice. Jada, please tell me you are looking at the quarterly reports for the downtown acquisition because the sellers are trying to renegotiate the closing costs. I am not looking at the reports, Kendra, I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady. I am looking at a Boeing 777. I am boarding a flight to Maui in 20 minutes. The line went completely silent. I could practically hear the gears turning in Kendra's sharp, analytical mind. We had built our real estate investment firm, Onyx Hospitality, from a tiny shared office into a multi-million-dollar empire. She knew me better than anyone. She knew I never abandoned a negotiation, and I certainly never took impulsive vacations. Maui. Kendra finally said, her voice dropping an octave. Your sister gets married in 10 days. You are the maid of honor. Why are you flying to Hawaii? I was the maid of honor, I corrected her. I was uninvited this afternoon. Apparently my natural hair and my overall aesthetic are too loud for Julian and his traditional New England family. Chloe and my parents decided I am a social liability. They told me to stay hidden so I do not ruin their upscale country club aesthetic. Kendra let out a sound that was half gasp and half laugh. It was the kind of laugh that contained absolutely zero humor. Are you telling me that your family just uninvited the silent majority owner of the very estate where they are hosting this wedding? Yes, I said simply. The sheer absurdity of the situation hung between us. 3 years ago, Kendra and I had acquired the Sterling Manor estate, adding it to our portfolio of luxury venues. It was an exclusive, highly sought-after property. When Chloe first got engaged, she had obsessed over it, completely unaware that my name was buried at the top of the ownership trust. My family still believed I was a struggling freelance consultant scraping by on small graphic design contracts. They loved to look down on me because I did not wear designer labels covered in logos or lease expensive cars to look rich. Real wealth is quiet. Fake wealth is loud, and my family was deafening. 6 months ago, I happened to be working in the back office of the estate when Chloe and my mother Vivica walked in for their venue tour. I watched through the security monitors as they sat across from my venue director. I watched my mother cry actual tears, begging for a 50% discount. They were entirely bankrupt. They had maxed out their credit cards trying to buy designer clothes and throw lavish engagement parties to impress Julian and his wealthy parents. They had absolutely no money left to pay for the actual wedding reception, but they refused to admit their financial reality to Julian. They wanted him to believe they were equal in status. The venue director was ready to reject them and cancel the reservation. Onyx Hospitality did not do discounts, but I was watching my mother and sister panic. Despite their constant microaggressions and their blatant colorism, they were still my blood. I felt a surge of misplaced protective loyalty. I did not want them to face that kind of social humiliation. So I made a monumental business error based on emotion. I quietly logged into the administrative portal and applied an anonymous corporate sponsorship to their contract. I became the financial guarantor. I personally fronted the $150,000 balance out of my own private accounts. To them, it looked like a miraculous corporate grant they had won through the venue. They had absolutely no idea that the sister they constantly degraded was the only reason they had a venue at all. Kendra broke the silence, bringing me back to the present. Jada, you paid for the hydrangeas. You paid for the imported Wagyu beef. You paid for the crystal champagne flutes they plan to toast with. You are bankrolling the entire illusion they are using to impress that man. I know, Kendra, I said, watching the boarding agent announce the first-class cabin. So what is the play here? Kendra asked, her voice turning razor sharp. Because if you let them get away with this, I will personally fly to Maui and throw you into a volcano. You do not reward this level of disrespect. You know our standard operating procedure for UN guaranteed accounts. I said, grabbing my carry-on bag. I need you to pull up their file in the system. I can hear Kendra typing furiously on her mechanical keyboard. The sound was incredibly satisfying. I have the file open, she said. I stepped into the jet bridge, the sterile airport air blowing past me. I will handle the final authorization when I land, I told her. Just make sure the venue director is prepared for a very uncomfortable conversation with the bride. I disconnected the call and handed my boarding pass to the flight attendant. I settled into my spacious leather seat and accepted a glass of sparkling water. The flight lasted nearly 10 hours, but I did not sleep. I spent the entire journey looking out the window at the endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean. I thought about the decades of subtle insults, the times my father told me to stay out of the sun so I would not get too dark, the times my mother praised Chloe for having good hair while handing me chemical relaxers. They had built an entire family dynamic around making me feel inferior. They had gladly taken my silent financial protection while simultaneously deciding my blackness was something to be ashamed of. The plane touched down in Maui. I walked out of the terminal, and the warm tropical breeze immediately enveloped me. The air smelled like salt and blooming hibiscus. It was a stark contrast to the cold, artificial environment of my family home back in the city. I stepped into the waiting luxury SUV that the resort had sent for me. As I rode toward the coast, the final piece of my resolve locked into place. They wanted a flawless, traditional high society wedding without me. They thought I was socially unfit to stand beside them in photographs. I looked out at the turquoise water sparkling under the Hawaiian sun. If my physical presence was unfit for their aesthetic, then my corporate sponsorship was unfit too. I was not going to pay for my own erasure. I pulled my laptop out of my bag. It was time to pull the plug. I sat on the expansive private balcony of my suite. The morning sun was just starting to crest over the Pacific Ocean, painting the water in brilliant shades of gold and deep indigo. The warm Hawaiian breeze ruffled the edges of my silk robe carrying the scent of sea salt and blooming flowers. It was absolute paradise. It was the exact opposite of the cold and artificial environment my family was currently trying to construct back on the East Coast. I settled into the plush wicker lounge chair and rested my laptop on my knees. The screen woke up instantly, displaying the secure administrative dashboard for Onyx Hospitality. I navigated to the active contracts folder. I typed Sterling Manor into the search bar and hit enter. The wedding file populated immediately. There it was in stark black and white. The client names were Chloe and Vivica. The groom was Julian. The total balance due was $150,000. And right below that, under the payment status section, was the secure override code I had personally authorized 6 months ago. That was the exact code that magically transformed their $0 bank account balance into a fully funded luxury event. I clicked into the itemized invoice. I wanted to look at exactly what my money was funding. There was a $20,000 charge for imported white orchids because Chloe insisted local flowers looked too cheap. There was a $35,000 catering bill featuring Wagyu beef and a custom champagne tower because Vivica wanted Julian's parents to think we dined like royalty. There was a custom monogrammed dance floor. There were premium silk linens. It was a masterpiece of financial deception. They were using my quiet wealth to build a loud and fake persona. They were leveraging my hard work to impress a family they thought was better than ours. And they were doing it while actively erasing me from the picture. I stared at their names on the screen. I thought about how easy it was for them to cut me out. They wanted my resources, but they despised my humanity. They loved the aesthetic of wealth, but they hated the black woman who actually held the keys to it. My natural hair and my confident voice were a threat to their carefully curated assimilation. I opened a new internal message window. I selected the email address for Marcus. He was the managing director of Sterling Manor. Marcus was sharp and efficient. He was absolutely ruthless when it came to corporate protocol. He had hated giving my mother the corporate grant in the first place because he had run their financials. He knew their credit was a disaster. He knew they could not even afford the deposit, let alone the final bill. He only pushed the contract through because I gave him a direct executive order to do so. I started typing. My fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard. I was fueled by a cold and heavy clarity. Marcus. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing the anonymous corporate sponsorship for the upcoming wedding this weekend. I need you to revert this account back to standard operating procedure. Please generate a new invoice reflecting the full outstanding balance of $150,000. Send it to the clients immediately. Per our corporate policy, for UN-guaranteed events occurring within 10 days, they have exactly 48 hours to remit the balance in full. We will only accept certified funds or a direct wire transfer. If the funds do not clear by that strict deadline, you are authorized to cancel the event entirely and lock the venue doors. I paused before hitting send. A small and lingering piece of the older sister inside me hesitated. I knew exactly what this email was going to do. If I sent this message, I was essentially dropping a nuclear bomb on Chloe's dream day. I was exposing my mother's reckless financial negligence. Julian and his wealthy traditional New England family were going to find out the truth. They were going to discover that the sophisticated upper-crust image my mother and sister had projected was nothing but a hollow shell. They were going to realize it was financed by the very woman my family had just banished for being too loud and too black. But then I remembered my father's voice on the speakerphone. I remembered him telling me to stay hidden so I would not make Julian's family uncomfortable. I remembered Chloe's text message. She had reduced my entire existence to an ugly inconvenience. She had weaponized Julian's race and his background to justify her own internalized hatred. They had drawn the battle lines. They made the rules. I was just choosing to fight back with the weapons I possessed. I moved the cursor over the send button and pressed down. The email vanished from my outbox. It flew across the digital space directly into Marcus's inbox. The safety net was officially gone. I had cut the cord. I closed my laptop with a soft and definitive click. I picked up the sweet telephone and called room service. I ordered a large caramel macchiato and a plate of fresh tropical fruit. Then I walked over to the glass patio table. I set my cell phone down right in the center of the table, facing up. I unlocked the screen and went into my settings. I made sure the volume was turned all the way to the maximum level. I made sure the screen notifications were set to remain visible. My family had exactly 48 hours to come up with $150,000 in cash. They had no savings. They had maxed out credit cards. They had absolutely no way to secure a loan in that amount of time. The venue director was probably drafting their updated invoice at this very moment. The countdown had officially started. Now there was nothing left for me to do but sit back, sip my coffee, and wait for the explosion. The sun climbed higher over the Maui coastline, turning the ocean into a brilliant sheet of crushed diamonds. I sat on my balcony, breathing in the sweet scent of plumeria. Back on the East Coast, it was exactly 3 in the afternoon. I knew that specific time because it was etched into the Sterling Manor event schedule. It was the exact hour Chloe and Vivica were scheduled to conduct their final venue walkthrough. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene unfolding thousands of miles away. Sterling Manor is a breathtaking property. It features imported Italian marble floors, a grand dual staircase, and a ballroom wrapped entirely in floor-to-ceiling glass. Chloe had probably walked through those massive double doors acting like she owned the place. She would be pointing her manicured fingers, ordering the staff to adjust the lighting, and complaining that the imported white orchids were not arranged to her exact specifications. Vivica would be trailing right behind her, sipping complimentary champagne and playing the role of the wealthy matriarch. They had spent the last year building a flawless house of cards. They leased luxury vehicles they could not afford. They purchased a designer wedding gown that cost more than my mother made in 2 years. They hosted ridiculous upscale brunch parties at country clubs to prove to Julian and his parents that our family belonged in their elite social stratosphere. They had drained every single bank account and maxed out every credit card to maintain this illusion. They felt completely secure doing this because they believed a magical corporate grant was covering the actual heavy lifting of the reception. They thought they were invincible. They thought they had successfully secured a wealthy future while simultaneously locking me in a closet because my unapologetic blackness threatened their assimilation. Right about now, the venue director would be walking across that marble floor holding a single manila folder. I had hired him because he was a master of high-end hospitality, but also because he possessed a spine of absolute steel. He would not raise his voice. He would not show emotion. He would simply pull them aside away from the floral arrangers and the lighting technicians. He would open the folder and present them with the revised invoice. I could perfectly envision the color draining from Vivica's face. The venue director would inform them that the anonymous corporate sponsorship had been permanently revoked due to an executive portfolio shift. He would hand them a bill for $150,000. He would explain the standard operating procedure for UN-guaranteed events. He would look them dead in the eye and tell them they had exactly 48 hours to produce a certified wire transfer or the venue doors would be locked and the wedding would be canceled. They had absolutely no backup plan. They had burned through their personal funds to buy an aesthetic they could not sustain. Without my hidden financial backing, they were utterly bankrupt. They were standing in the middle of a luxury estate with a 6-figure debt staring them in the face and a wealthy groom who believed they were financial equals. The glass table vibrated sharply against my coffee cup. I opened my eyes and looked down. My phone screen lit up, shattering the peaceful Hawaiian morning. The name Vivica flashed across the digital display, followed immediately by a text message preview. I did not pick up the phone. I just leaned forward and read the words illuminating the screen. Jada, sweetie. I know tensions are a little high right now after our last phone call, but we have a tiny emergency. We ran into a minor vendor issue with the venue. I need a quick loan of $150,000 to cover a deposit error. We will pay you back right after the wedding. Please call me the second you get this. It is urgent. I read the message a second time and let out a soft laugh. The sheer audacity of her words was staggering. A minor vendor issue. She was trying to frame a 6-figure venue default as a simple clerical error. She was asking for $150,000 with the casual urgency of someone asking to borrow $20 for gas. But the most revealing part of the message was her opening. Jada, sweetie. For 35 years, I had been the difficult child. I was the aggressive daughter. I was the one who needed to tone it down and step aside. I was the social liability who was unfit to stand beside my lighter-skinned sister in her elegant wedding photos. But the exact second she needed a massive financial bailout, I suddenly became Sweetie. She thought I was stupid. She thought I was just a bitter, jealous sister sitting in my apartment crying over my unceremonious rejection. She assumed I had enough credit to float her a massive loan, and she fully intended to use my money to save the very wedding I was banished from attending. She had no idea that I was the one who generated that invoice. She had no idea I was sitting in paradise holding the keys to the kingdom she was desperately trying to claim. The phone vibrated again. Another text message. This one was from Chloe. Jada, please pick up. Mom said she texted you. We really need your help with a bank issue. Do not be petty about the wedding thing. We are family. Do not be petty. The irony was thick enough to choke on. They had erased my humanity to appease a wealthy white family, but the moment their wallets ran dry, they wanted to weaponize the concept of family to save themselves. I leaned back in my lounge chair and picked up my ceramic mug. The coffee was rich and perfectly roasted. I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the warm liquid coat my throat. I looked out at the rolling waves crashing against the pristine beach below. I reached out and tapped the side button on my phone, switching the device to completely silent. I set it face up on the table. The 48-hour deadline was officially ticking down, and I was not going to lift a single finger to stop the clock. The first 20 minutes of silence from my end must have been deafening for my mother. I sat on my balcony in Maui, watching the ocean waves roll against the shore while my phone screen documented the rapid deterioration of my family's sanity. The initial text from Vivica asking for a quick loan had been sent with the casual entitlement of a woman who fully expected the world to bend to her will. But as the minutes ticked by without a response, her carefully constructed facade began to crack. My screen lit up again. This text was no longer addressing me as Sweetie. It read, Jada, this is not a joke. Pick up your phone right now. The venue director is being completely unreasonable and demanding a certified wire transfer. We need your credit card information immediately to put a hold on the account. Call me. I did not touch the phone. I let it sit right there on the glass table. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. This time it was from my father, Calvin. For my entire life, Calvin had ruled our household with an iron fist. He expected absolute obedience, and he demanded that we sacrifice our own comfort to maintain his image. His text was a digital command. Jada, pick up the phone. You do not ignore your mother when she is in distress. We are looking at a massive bill, and the bank is taking too long to approve a temporary line of credit. We need your resources right now. Do not be selfish. I smiled at the word selfish. They had literally uninvited me from the biggest family event of the decade because my natural hair and my dark skin did not fit their upscale aesthetic. They banished me to protect their proximity to Julian's wealthy white family. Yet the absolute second their financial house of cards caught fire, I was suddenly expected to be the dutiful, obedient daughter who empties her bank accounts to save their pride. They were scrambling. The venue director was executing my orders with flawless precision. I knew exactly what was happening because my business partner Kendra was forwarding me the internal updates straight from our corporate headquarters. My phone chimed with a message from Kendra. The venue director just ran 3 of Vivica's credit cards. Every single one declined. They are practically hyperventilating in the lobby. They asked for an extension, and he told them corporate policy dictates the doors lock in 48 hours without cash in hand. Kendra sent another update a few minutes later. Calvin just tried to offer the title to his luxury SUV as collateral. The venue director politely informed him that Onyx Hospitality is a real estate investment firm and not a pawn shop. I let out a sharp laugh that startled a small bird resting on my balcony railing. My father, the proud patriarch who always told me to make myself smaller, was now trying to barter his car to save face. The reality of their situation was finally setting in. They could not secure a loan in 48 hours. No reputable bank was going to hand over $150,000 to people with maxed out credit and massive debt-to-income ratios. They had spent the last 2 years living wildly beyond their means, buying designer clothes and hosting lavish country club dinners to prove to Julian's family that we were part of the elite. They had burned through their entire safety net just to look the part. They were completely and utterly bankrupt. And now the vendors were catching wind of the default. The notifications on my screen started coming in faster, turning into a steady, relentless stream of panic. Chloe started texting me in a complete frenzy. "Jada, please, I am begging you. The caterer just said they are going to cancel the imported Wagyu beef order if the venue does not guarantee the funds. The florists are literally packing up the white orchids. You have to help me. Julian's parents are arriving tomorrow. If they find out we cannot afford this, the wedding is over. Please do not do this to me." Chloe's texts became a rapid-fire stream of unhinged entitlement. "Jada, this is my dream day. You know Julian's family is old money. If they show up to an empty ballroom, they will cancel the marriage. They will know we are frauds. I will never forgive you if you do not wire the money right now." She was demanding salvation from the very person she considered a stain on her perfect assimilated life. She wanted my thick, loud, unapologetically black money to save her proximity to whiteness. Do not do this to her. She had sent me a text erasing my humanity and stripping me of my dignity just days prior, but somehow I was the one doing this to her. She had built a wedding on a foundation of lies and colorism, and now she was terrified that the man she was marrying was going to see the ugly truth beneath her elegant aesthetic. Over the next 3 hours, I sat in my lounge chair and watched my phone screen illuminate continuously. The device vibrated across the glass table, creating a frantic buzzing rhythm that echoed the absolute chaos unfolding back on the East Coast. They were calling back to back to back. When I did not answer, they would hang up and dial again immediately. The desperation was palpable. They were cornered animals realizing the trap had finally snapped shut. I watched the sun slowly arc across the Hawaiian sky. I ordered a plate of fresh pineapple and took my time enjoying every single bite. My phone never stopped vibrating. By the time the afternoon shadows began to stretch across my balcony, the notification counter on my screen had reached a staggering number. 115 missed calls. 115 times my mother, my father, and my sister had desperately tried to reach the very woman they had discarded. They had tried calling from their cell phones. They had tried calling from the venue's landline. They had probably even tried calling from burner numbers. It was a torrential avalanche of panic. The silence I was giving them was heavier and more destructive than any screaming match we could have ever had. I was starving them of the access and the compliance they felt so entitled to. I finally reached out and picked up the device. The metal was almost warm to the touch from vibrating so much. I did not open the text messages. I did not open the missed call log. Instead, I navigated directly to my voicemail app. There was a little red bubble indicating that my mailbox was completely full. They had filled every single available minute of recording time with their unraveling sanity. I leaned back against the plush cushions of the lounge chair. I tapped the screen and pressed play on the very first audio message, ready to listen to the sound of my family's carefully curated illusion shattering into a million expensive pieces. I tapped the play button and brought the phone closer to my ear. The very first voicemail was from my mother. It was recorded exactly 10 minutes after the venue director handed her that revised invoice. Her voice came through the speaker crisp and laced with that familiar heavy authority she always used to keep me in line. "Jada, call me back this instant. The event coordinator here is making a massive mistake. He is claiming your corporate grant was pulled, and he is demanding we put down a credit card for the full balance. I need you to call the venue and fix this clerical error right now. Do not play games with me today." The sheer arrogance of her tone was incredible. She still believed she was entirely in control. She still thought I was just a subordinate employee in her grand production. I deleted the message and skipped ahead, letting the audio files run. By the fifth voicemail, the reality of the situation had clearly started to set in. Vivica did not sound authoritative anymore. She sounded breathless and erratic. "Jada, where are you? Why is your phone off? The director is completely serious. He said the corporate sponsor withdrew and he wants cash. We do not have that kind of cash, Jada. The floral team is threatening to take the orchids back to the warehouse if we do not show proof of funds. Call me the second you get this. We need your credit cards to secure a temporary hold. I will pay you back, I swear. Just pick up the phone. Means say? I smiled at the beautiful Hawaiian ocean. I took another slow bite of fresh pineapple. The contrast between my absolute peace and their total destruction was intoxicating. I skipped forward again, bypassing dozens of frantic hang-ups and heavy breathing. I landed on voicemail number 20. This one was from my father. Calvin rarely raised his voice unless he felt his patriarchal authority was being directly challenged. The audio started with a loud crashing sound, like he had kicked a chair or slammed his hand against a marble table. Jada listened to me very carefully. Calvin barked, his voice vibrating with absolute rage. You need to call your bank right now. I do not care if you have to empty out your entire retirement account. I do not care if you have to take out a high-interest personal loan. You are going to fix this. Julian and his parents are flying in tomorrow morning. Do you have any idea how humiliating it will be if they arrive to an empty venue? Do you understand what this will do to our reputation? We are about to merge our family with old money, and you are jeopardizing everything because you are throwing a childish tantrum over a wedding invitation. Call me back and send the wire transfer immediately. You owe this family. I let the voicemail play all the way to the end just to savor the absolute delusion. He genuinely believed I owed them my life savings to protect a reputation that did not even exist. He wanted me to sacrifice my future to fund a wedding I was banished from attending. They were so blinded by their proximity to whiteness and their desperate need to assimilate that they had completely lost touch with reality. I deleted his message with a single swipe of my finger. I scrolled down to the very last few messages. These were from Chloe. The golden child was finally experiencing the consequences of her own cruelty. I pressed play on a voicemail she left just 20 minutes ago. Chloe was not just crying, she was hyperventilating. The sound of her ragged breathing filled my balcony. Jada, please. Please, I am begging you. Her voice cracked into a high-pitched sob. The caterers just locked the kitchens. They are leaving. The venue director gave us until tomorrow morning, or he is voiding the contract entirely. Julian is going to find out. He is going to find out we do not have any money. He thinks we are wealthy, Jada. His parents think we are equal to them. If he sees we cannot even afford our own reception, he is going to leave me. He will know I have been lying this whole time. You cannot let him see who we really are. You have to save me. I will do anything, just wire the money. Please. I listened to her beg. She was terrified that Julian would discover she was a fraud. She had spent 2 years pretending to be an elegant upper-class socialite. She had scrubbed every trace of our true background from her life. She even tried to scrub me from her wedding because my dark skin and natural hair threatened to expose her illusion. Now the very foundation of her lies was collapsing, and she was begging the sister she despised to build it back up. She did not apologize for her racist text message. She did not apologize for excluding me. She was only sorry that her fake aesthetic was crumbling. She only cared about losing the wealthy man she had deceived. I deleted the final voicemail and set the phone down. I took a deep breath of the warm, tropical air. For 35 years, I had carried the weight of their expectations. I had absorbed their subtle insults and their blatant disrespect. I had protected them and funded them and loved them, even when they made it explicitly clear that my blackness was an embarrassment. That weight was finally gone. I felt lighter than I had in my entire life. Suddenly, the phone screen shifted. The recorded voicemails vanished, and a live video call request popped up. It was a FaceTime call from Chloe. They had exhausted every single audio message. They had sent dozens of text messages. Now they were trying to force a face-to-face confrontation. A week ago, I would have ignored it to keep the peace. A week ago, I would have quietly absorbed their panic and stepped in to fix their mess. But I was not the same woman who read that uninviting text message in silence. I was the chief executive officer of my own life. It was finally time to show them exactly who was in charge. I reached out and pressed the green button to accept the call. The screen buffered for a fraction of a second before the video feed snapped into sharp focus. The visual contrast between my world and theirs was almost cinematic. On my end, the brilliant Hawaiian sun cast a warm golden glow across my face. The endless turquoise waves of the Pacific Ocean rolled lazily in the background, framing my absolute peace. I was lounging in a plush chair, wearing a vibrant yellow silk robe, looking rested, radiant, and completely unbothered. On their end, the camera was shaking wildly in someone's trembling hand. Chloe, Vivica, and Calvin were crammed together, staring desperately down into the lens. The space behind them was dark and cavernous. I recognized the grand ballroom at Sterling Manor immediately, but it was completely stripped of its usual magic. The massive crystal chandeliers were turned off, the tables were bare, the room was empty, and their voices echoed hollowly off the Italian marble floors. They looked absolutely terrible. Chloe's expensive blowout had fallen flat and frizzy around her shoulders. Her mascara was smudged under her wide, terrified eyes. Vivica looked pale and haggard, entirely stripped of the haughty country club arrogance she wore like armor. But it was Calvin who took up the majority of the screen. His face was flushed dark red, and a visible vein throbbed at his temple. He snatched the phone from Chloe's hand, gripping it so tightly, I thought the screen might crack. "Jada, where on earth have you been?" Calvin barked. His deep voice boomed through my phone speaker. There was no hello. There was no asking how my flight was. There was just pure, unadulterated entitlement. "I am exactly where you told me to be, Dad." I replied, my voice completely smooth and even. "I am staying far out of sight so I do not ruin the elegant aesthetic you all worked so hard to build for Julian and his traditional family." Chloe pushed her face back into the frame, practically shoving my father aside. "Jada, please stop playing around," she pleaded, her voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. The venue director locked the ballroom doors. He told the caterers to pack up the trucks and go home. "Julian's parents are hosting the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night. If we do not have this venue secured by tomorrow morning, the entire wedding is off. You have to wire us $150,000 right now." Vivica leaned in right next to Chloe, attempting to use her best maternal manipulation tactics. "Sweetie, we know you are a little upset about the invitation. We were just trying to navigate a very delicate cultural dynamic with Julian's family. We did not mean to hurt your feelings. We promise we will make it up to you. We will take you out for a nice dinner when we get back. Just give us your credit card numbers. We are completely out of time, and the bank is taking too long to approve a temporary line of credit." I sat there and stared at the three of them. A delicate cultural dynamic. That is what Vivica was calling it. She was trying to sanitize the fact that they had explicitly told me my blackness was a social liability. They had told me my natural hair was too aggressive for their white in-laws. But to them, it was just a minor misunderstanding that could be fixed with a cheap dinner date. They expected me to swallow my dignity, forget my humanity, and empty my bank accounts to protect their fragile egos. When I did not immediately offer up my financial resources, Calvin lost what little patience he had left. He took the phone back and glared into the camera. He fell right back into the toxic, patriarchal authority he had used to control our household for decades. "You listen to me, Jada," Calvin growled, his voice vibrating with absolute rage. "I am your father, and I am telling you to fix this. You are going to log into your bank account, and you are going to initiate an emergency wire transfer to the venue right this second. You owe this family. We put a roof over your head. We raised you. You do not get to turn your back on your own blood just because your feelings got hurt over a dress code." A dress code? I analyzed his words silently. He was actively minimizing the racist erasure I had experienced, framing it as a simple wardrobe dispute. He wanted to shame me into submission. "You are the older sister." Calvin continued, breathing heavily into the microphone. "It is your job to protect Chloe. She is about to secure a future that elevates all of us. If Julian walks away from this marriage because you were too selfish to help us, I will never forgive you. You will be dead to this family. Do you understand me? You will wire that money right now, or you are no longer my daughter." I watched him glare at me through the screen. He genuinely thought his ultimatums still held power over me. He thought the threat of being disowned would terrify me into opening my wallet. He had absolutely no idea that I had already disowned them the moment I boarded my flight to Maui. They wanted to cast me as the bitter, jealous villain who was ruining a beautiful marriage, but they were the ones who had built a wedding on a foundation of lies and financial ruin. I took a slow sip of my iced water. The condensation dripped down the side of the glass. I looked directly into the camera lens, meeting my father's furious gaze with total serenity. "Dad, you are absolutely right about one thing," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "The venue director is not playing games. He is going to keep those doors locked until he sees a certified wire transfer clear the corporate accounts. But there is a very specific reason he is not accepting your credit cards today." "What are you talking about?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling with fresh panic. "How do you know what the director is doing?" I let a slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. I adjusted my position in my lounge chair, preparing to drop the ultimate financial guillotine right on top of their fragile house of cards. "I know exactly what the venue director is doing, Chloe, because he works for me." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that happens right before a building collapses. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, making sure my face was perfectly framed in the center of their screen. "Let me spell it out for you clearly," I said, keeping my tone conversational but razor sharp. "You all spent the last 10 years mocking my career choices. You told your country club friends I was just a struggling consultant doing small graphic design gigs. You thought my life was small because I did not wear designer logos or lease luxury cars I could not afford. You never actually bothered to ask what my company, Onyx Hospitality, actually does. We are a luxury real estate investment firm. And 3 years ago, my business partner and I acquired Sterling Manor." I watched the blood completely drain out of my father's face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The realization was hitting him like a freight train. I owned the very floor they were standing on. I owned the crystal chandeliers hanging above their heads. I was the landlord of their high society dreams. 6 months ago, I was sitting in the back office when you and Mom came in for your venue tour. I continued, my eyes locked on Chloe. "I watched you cry to my venue director, begging for a massive discount because you were completely bankrupt. I saw how desperate you were to impress Julian and his wealthy white family. You had maxed out every credit card you had just to maintain the illusion that we were their financial equals. Against all professional advice, I logged into the corporate system and created that anonymous sponsorship. I personally fronted the $150,000 to cover your Wagyu beef, your imported orchids, and your custom champagne flutes. I bought your entire elegant aesthetic out of my own private accounts because despite how horribly you treat me, I still wanted to protect my family from social humiliation." Chloe let out a sound that was half gasp and half sob. She raised her hand to her mouth, her eyes darting frantically around the empty ballroom as if she expected me to step out from behind a pillar. "Vivica looked like she might physically be sick. But then you sent me that text message," I said, my voice dropping into a deadly calm register. "You told me my natural hair and my unapologetic blackness did not fit your vibe. You told me my loud style would embarrass you in front of Julian's traditional New England relatives. You erased my humanity to make yourself more palatable to them. So I made a corporate decision. I decided that if I am too socially unfit to attend this wedding, then my thick, loud, natural money is entirely too unfit to pay for it." Calvin tried to speak. His thick, patriarchal confidence was completely gone, replaced by a trembling, desperate stutter. "Jada, you cannot do this. We are your blood. We had no idea. I am not wiring you a single dime," I said, cutting him off completely. "You wanted a high society wedding without me. Now you get to pay for it without me." That was the exact moment Vivica lost her mind. The fake, sweet maternal mask she wore for high society completely melted away, exposing the vicious colorist woman underneath. She shoved Calvin aside and grabbed the phone with both hands. The camera jerked wildly, capturing her distorted face. "You are a monster," Vivica screamed. Her voice echoed off the marble walls of the empty ballroom, sounding absolutely demonic. "You have always been jealous of your sister. You have always been bitter that she is lighter and prettier and more refined than you. You planned this just to humiliate her because you cannot stand seeing her marry into a family that would never accept someone like you. You are destroying her life out of pure spite. She was practically spitting into the microphone. Decades of her internalized hatred were pouring out in real time. She was confirming every single reason I had for walking away. I just sat there holding my gaze steady. I let her scream. I let her show exactly who she was. Suddenly, the camera jerked violently again. The image on my screen blurred into a dizzying smear of colors. I heard a loud scuffle and Vivica let out a shocked gasp. The phone had been snatched directly out of her hands with serious force. The lens pointed at the ceiling for a frantic second before stabilizing. A new face came into view. It was not my mother. It was not my father. And it was not Chloe. The violent motion of the camera finally stopped. The blurry ceiling of the ballroom settled into a sharp focus on a completely new face. It was Julian. He was wearing a tailored navy blue suit, looking every bit the refined New England architect he was. But the usual relaxed confidence he carried was entirely gone. His blue eyes were wide and his pale face was completely drained of color. He was breathing heavily, staring into the camera as if he had just watched a car crash happen right in front of him. "Jada, what is going on here?" Julian asked. His voice was remarkably quiet, but it carried a sharp edge of absolute shock. "I just walked into the lobby to bring the caterer a final head count. I heard screaming echoing down the hallway. I heard your mother calling you a monster. And I heard you say you are the one paying for this venue." Before I could even formulate a response, the camera jerked again. Chloe lunged into the frame. She looked like a feral animal. She was clawing at Julian's arm, desperately trying to snatch the phone out of his hand. "Julian, please give it back to me," Chloe sobbed. Her voice was high and hysterical. "It is a complete misunderstanding. Jada is just making things up. She is so jealous of us, Julian. She is just a bitter, angry woman trying to ruin our perfect day because she is completely alone. Give me the phone right now." Julian did not give her the phone. He was easily a foot taller than my sister. He simply lifted his arm higher, stepping backward and physically putting distance between himself and Chloe's frantic, grasping hands. He turned his body, shielding the screen from her. "Stop it, Chloe," Julian commanded. His tone was not loud, but it was incredibly firm. The kind of firm tone that completely paralyzed her. Chloe froze in her tracks, her hands covering her mouth as she let out a loud, dramatic wail. Vivica rushed forward and grabbed Chloe by the shoulders, trying to pull her back and restore some sense of order, but the damage was already done. Julian looked back into the camera. He ignored the hysterical crying happening right behind him. "Jada," he said, keeping his eyes locked on mine. "What did she mean when she talked about your hair? What text message were you quoting just now?" I sat back in my plush lounge chair. The Hawaiian breeze gently moved the palm trees behind me. I looked at the man my sister was so desperate to marry. I actually felt a small wave of genuine pity for him. Julian was a good man. He had spent the last 2 years believing he was marrying a progressive, sophisticated woman who loved her family. He thought Vivica and Calvin were successful modern parents. He had absolutely no idea he was marrying into a toxic house of cards built entirely on colorism, financial fraud, and deep-seated insecurity. "Julian," I said, my voice perfectly steady, "I really do not want to be the one to break this to you, but you are marrying a stranger. The woman standing behind you has spent the last 2 years erasing her own identity just to make sure she fits into your world. And part of that erasure meant getting rid of me." "That is a lie," Chloe shrieked from the background. "Julian, do not listen to her. She is insane. She is trying to extort us." I did not even acknowledge Chloe. I kept my eyes on Julian. "I am not going to sit here and argue with them, Julian," I told him. "I do not need to defend my character or explain my business assets to a family that just spent the last 20 minutes demanding my money while simultaneously trashing my existence. You asked what text message I was quoting. I am not going to tell you what it said. I am just going to show you." I reached across the glass patio table and picked up my secondary business phone. I unlocked the screen and opened my personal messages. I scrolled down to the exact text message Chloe had sent me 10 days ago. I stared at the words for a brief second. The message where she explicitly told me my dark skin, My natural hair and my loud aesthetic were a social liability. The message where she weaponized his wealthy white family to justify keeping me locked away in the shadows. The words were just as cruel now as they were the day she sent them, but they no longer held any power over me. They were just digital evidence of her absolute moral bankruptcy. I pressed the buttons on my device and took a crystal clear screenshot of the entire conversation. I made sure the timestamp and Chloe's contact photo were perfectly visible. I wanted absolutely zero room for ambiguity. I opened a new message thread and typed in Julian's phone number. I had saved his contact information months ago when we were coordinating a surprise birthday gift for Chloe. It was highly ironic that the very same contact info was now going to dismantle her entire life. I attached the screenshot to the message. I did not add any additional text. The evidence was damning enough on its own. It did not need a caption or a lengthy explanation. I looked back at the FaceTime screen. Julian was staring at me, waiting for my next move. Chloe was hyperventilating, clinging to Vivica's arm in the background. Calvin was standing perfectly still, looking like a man who knew the executioner had just pulled the lever. "Check your personal cell phone, Julian," I said smoothly. "I just sent you exactly what you asked for. Read it carefully." I watched through the FaceTime feed as Julian reached into his tailored suit jacket. He pulled out his own smartphone. The screen illuminated instantly. A notification chime echoed loudly through the empty marble ballroom, slicing through Chloe's frantic sobbing. Julian looked down at his screen and opened the message. I watched through the screen as Julian stared at his phone. The silence in the massive ballroom was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the faint sound of his breathing through the microphone. He did not just read the message once. I could tell by the way his blue eyes tracked across the bright screen that he was reading it a second and then a third time. He was trying to comprehend the sheer cruelty of the words written by the woman he was supposed to marry in just 10 days. Chloe could not stand the silence. The tension was suffocating her. She reached out and grabbed his forearm. "Julian," she whimpered. "Julian, please, you have to listen to me. It is completely taken out of context. Jada is manipulating the situation just to make me look bad." Julian did not yell. He did not throw the phone or make a grand dramatic gesture. He simply stepped backward and physically pulled his arm out of her grasp. He looked at Chloe as if he had absolutely no idea who she was. His voice was frighteningly calm when he finally spoke. "You told your sister that her natural hair and her thick vibe do not fit my family aesthetic." Julian read the words directly from the screen, his tone dripping with disbelief. "You told her she was uninvited because my parents are too traditional and conservative to accept her unapologetic blackness. You actually typed the words that she is socially unfit to be seen at our wedding." Chloe burst into fresh tears. The elegant, sophisticated persona she had spent 2 years perfecting was entirely gone. "I was just stressed, Julian," she sobbed, wiping her face frantically. "The wedding planning got to me and we were fighting. I just wanted everything to be perfect for your parents. I wanted them to be proud of us. I wanted to fit in." Julian shook his head slowly. "Do not put this on my parents, Chloe. Do not you dare put this on my family. My mother runs a progressive nonprofit, and my father has spent his entire career fighting for civil rights. They have never once judged you or your family. They were incredibly excited to meet Jada. They asked about her just yesterday. You completely fabricated this entire narrative." He was putting all the pieces together in real time. The camera caught every single micro-expression on his face as the realization hit him. "You did not uninvite your sister to protect my family." Julian said, his voice growing harder with every word. "You uninvited her because you are ashamed of her. You are ashamed of your own sister because her skin is darker than yours, and because she refuses to assimilate the way you do. You used my whiteness and my family background as a weapon to execute your own colorism. You lied to me about your sister. You lied to my parents about why she was not coming. And the money," Julian continued, his eyes darting to my mother and then to my father. "You told me your family was covering this venue out of your personal trust fund. You let me believe we were entering this marriage as financial equals. But Jada just said she was the one paying for all of this. She said she was your anonymous corporate sponsor. You have been completely bankrupt this entire time. Vivica tried to step in, her voice shaking. She reached out a hand, attempting to play the role of the reasonable matriarch. Julian, dear, let us not discuss finances right now. We can explain everything. It was just a temporary cash flow issue and Jada is just being vindictive. Julian looked at my mother with pure disgust. You let your daughter banish her own sister for her skin tone and her natural hair, he said. And then you turned around and demanded that same sister empty her bank accounts to save your pride. You are all living an absolute lie. Every single thing about this wedding, this aesthetic, this family, it is all completely fake. You wanted me to marry a stranger. Chloe fell to her knees right there on the marble floor. She was grabbing at Julian's suit pants, sobbing hysterically. I love you, Julian. I swear I love you. I just wanted to be enough for you. I wanted to be the elegant wife you deserve. Please do not let Jada ruin us. Julian stepped back again, forcing Chloe's hands to drop to the floor. Jada did not ruin anything, Chloe, he said, looking down at her. You ruined it the moment you decided your sister's humanity was worth less than a country club aesthetic. That was when Calvin decided to intervene. My father stepped forward, puffing out his chest and attempting to use that heavy patriarchal dominance he always relied on to control our household. He thought he could speak man to man and fix the destruction. Julian's son, let us just take a breath, Calvin said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. We are all adults here. You know how women get when they are emotional. They get swept up in the stress of the wedding and they say things they do not mean. Chloe is just overwhelmed. Let us go back to the hotel, have a stiff drink, and smooth this all over like men. I watched the screen, waiting for Julian to respond. I wondered if he would cave to my father's old-school manipulation. But Julian did not even blink. He looked at Calvin with a level of contempt that I had never seen directed at my father before. There is absolutely nothing to smooth over, Calvin. Julian said, his voice completely devoid of warmth. I am not going to sit down and have a drink with a man who enables the emotional abuse of his own daughter. I am not going to marry into a family that operates on deception and racism and financial fraud. Julian looked down at his left hand. He reached over and grasped the expensive platinum engagement ring Chloe had bought for him. The ring she had undoubtedly purchased using credit cards she could not afford to pay off. With a slow and deliberate motion, he began to slide the ring off his finger. The heavy platinum ring slid over Julian's knuckle with a finality that seemed to suck all the air out of the grand ballroom. He did not toss it at her. He did not make a dramatic, cinematic gesture. He simply reached over to one of the bare catering tables, the ones my money was supposed to cover in silk linens, and placed the ring down on the cold, hard surface. The sharp metallic clink echoed loudly through the empty space. It was the sound of a carefully curated illusion shattering into a million pieces. I cannot marry you, Chloe, Julian said. His voice was incredibly steady, completely stripped of the warmth he usually carried. I cannot tie my life to someone who could be so vicious to her own sister just to maintain a fake image. I cannot build a family with someone who lies so easily to me and to my parents about who she really is. There is no foundation here. There is nothing but a performance, and I am not sticking around to watch the final act. Chloe let out a sound that I had never heard her make before. It was a guttural, desperate wail that completely shattered her delicate, refined persona. She lunged forward, grabbing the lapels of Julian's tailored suit jacket. Her manicured fingers twisted into the expensive fabric. Julian, please do not do this, Chloe sobbed. Her face was red and blotchy, her makeup running in dark streams down her cheeks. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can elope. You do not have to deal with my family at all if you do not want to. Just do not leave me. I did all of this for you. I changed everything about myself for you. Julian looked down at her hands, gripping his jacket. He gently but firmly peeled her fingers off his chest, stepping back to create a solid boundary between them. You did not do this for me, Chloe, he replied, his tone laced with absolute exhaustion. You did this for you. You wanted the aesthetic. You wanted the status. You were so obsessed with appearing perfect that you sold out your own sister. You weaponized my family to justify your own prejudice. You wanted me to believe you were protecting me from her when in reality, she is the only reason you even had a venue to stand in today. I am done. The wedding is off. Calvin stepped forward again, his chest puffed out, attempting one last desperate play at patriarchal control. Now listen here, son, you are making a massive mistake over a simple misunderstanding. You cannot just walk away from a commitment like this. We have deposits. We have guests arriving. There are no deposits, Calvin. Julian shot back, cutting my father off completely. Jada paid for everything and she just pulled the funding. You have absolutely nothing. As for the guests, I am calling my parents right now. They are at the airport waiting to board their flight from Boston. I am telling them to turn the car around and go back home. I will contact the rest of my side of the guest list personally. You can figure out what to tell your own friends. I suggest you tell them the truth for once. Julian did not wait for a response. He turned his back on my father and walked away. The sound of his leather dress shoes echoing against the Italian marble floors was a slow, steady drumbeat of absolute rejection. He pushed through the massive double doors of the ballroom and let them swing shut behind him. He did not look back. Chloe collapsed completely. Her knees gave out and she slumped onto the hard floor in a heap of designer clothing she could not afford. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing so violently, her entire body shook. The golden child was finally experiencing a consequence she could not charm her way out of. Vivica dropped to her knees beside Chloe, wrapping her arms around her weeping daughter. My mother rocked her back and forth, murmuring frantic, soothing words that did absolutely nothing to stop the reality of their destruction. Calvin stood frozen in the center of the room, staring at the closed double doors. The powerful patriarch was entirely powerless. He could not bully or command Julian into returning. He could not intimidate the situation into fixing itself. His authority meant absolutely nothing outside the walls of our toxic household. I sat on my balcony in Hawaii watching the entire scene unfold through the screen of my phone. I did not feel a rush of victorious joy. I did not feel the need to gloat or laugh. I just felt a profound, heavy sense of finality. Gravity was finally doing its job. They had built a house on a foundation of sand and lies, and I simply stopped holding up the walls. For a long moment, the only sound coming through the speaker was Chloe's ragged sobbing. But then the dynamic in the room shifted. Vivica slowly stopped rocking Chloe. She lifted her head and looked around the empty ballroom until her eyes landed on the phone. It was still propped up on a chair, perfectly capturing their ruin. The sorrow on my mother's face vanished instantly. The maternal devastation hardened into something cold, sharp, and intensely vindictive. She let go of Chloe and stood up, smoothing down the front of her expensive dress. She walked directly toward the camera, her eyes burning with a dark, furious malice. She reached out and snatched the phone, lifting it so her face filled my entire screen. She was breathing heavily, her nostrils flaring. "You think you won," Vivica hissed, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You think you can just sit on a beach and destroy your sister's entire life without any consequences." I met her furious gaze with complete serenity. "I did not destroy anything, Mom," I replied evenly. "I just showed Julian the exact text message Chloe sent me. I showed him the truth. If the truth destroyed her relationship, then the relationship was a lie. You all did this to yourselves." "You vicious, jealous little girl!" Vivica spat, cutting me off. "You have always hated her. You have always hated that she is beautiful and elegant and wanted by a man with real wealth and status. You could not stand seeing her get everything you could never have. So you used your little corporate trick to ruin her financially and humiliate her in front of her fiancé. You took everything from her today." "I am not the one who lied about the venue," I pointed out. "I am not the one who maxed out credit cards to fake a lifestyle. I am just the one who stopped paying for it." Vivica shook her head, a dark, bitter smile twisting her lips. "You are going to pay for this, Jada," she promised, her voice trembling with absolute rage. "If you think we are just going to walk away and let you humiliate us like this, you are completely delusional. You ruined my daughter's reputation. You humiliated this family. We are going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of bitter, spiteful person you really are. If we are going down, we are taking you and that precious little company of yours right down with us." Before I could say another word, the screen went completely black. The call disconnected. I pulled the phone away from my ear and set it down on the glass table. The Hawaiian sun was still shining. The ocean waves were still crashing against the shore. My peace remained entirely undisturbed. But I knew my mother. I knew her desperate need to control the narrative and protect her social standing at all costs. She was cornered, broke, and humiliated. She was going to lash out with everything she had left. The wedding was dead, but the war was far from over. I picked up my coffee cup and took a slow, deliberate sip. Let them try. I slept better that night than I had in a decade. I woke up the next morning to the sound of tropical birds singing outside my balcony window. The Hawaiian sun was bright and warm, pouring through the sheer curtains of my luxury suite. I stretched, feeling completely rested and utterly free. I ordered a massive room service breakfast, consisting of macadamia nut pancakes and fresh Kona coffee. I was fully prepared to spend the entire day lying by the infinity pool and reading a novel. But my mother was a woman of her word. She had promised to destroy my reputation, and she wasted absolutely no time executing her threat. When I finally picked up my phone after breakfast, the screen was a chaotic mess of notifications. There were no missed calls this time. Instead, there was a relentless flood of social media alerts, direct messages, and text messages from extended family members I had not spoken to in years. The notification counter on my Instagram and Facebook apps was climbing into the hundreds. I opened a text message from my cousin Valerie. Valerie was the kind of family member who only reached out when there was gossip to consume. Her text was brief and venomous. She wrote, "I cannot believe you would do something so evil to your own sister. You are a bitter, miserable woman." I clicked the link she had attached to the message. The link redirected me to a video that had been uploaded simultaneously to both Chloe and Vivica's social media profiles. The video was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. They had clearly spent hours staging the shot. They were sitting on the expensive white sofa in my parents' living room. The lighting was deliberately dim and melancholic. Chloe was wearing a plain, oversized gray sweatshirt. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and her face was completely devoid of makeup. She looked frail and devastated, perfectly playing the role of the heartbroken bride. Vivica sat right beside her, holding Chloe's hand and gently stroking her arm. Vivica was wearing a simple, modest cardigan, looking like a weary, exhausted mother who was just trying to protect her youngest child. I pressed play and watched the performance unfold. Chloe looked directly into the camera lens with wide, tear-filled eyes. She took a shaky breath before she started speaking. Her voice was incredibly weak and fragile. "I never thought I would have to make a video like this," Chloe whispered, letting a single tear roll down her cheek. "I never thought my own flesh and blood could be so cruel. Yesterday was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was supposed to be marrying the man of my dreams. But my older sister Jada decided to destroy everything." Chloe paused to let out a dramatic sob. Vivica pulled her closer, looking into the camera with an expression of deep sorrow. Chloe continued her fabricated story. "Jada has always struggled with jealousy. She has always been resentful that I found love and happiness. We tried so hard to include her in the wedding. We did everything we could to make her feel loved. But she could not stand seeing me marry Julian. She could not stand seeing me happy. So she used her corporate position to sabotage the entire event." Vivica took over the narrative, perfectly tagging in to deliver the heavy blows. My mother looked straight into the camera and lied with absolute flawless conviction. "As a mother, it breaks my heart to see my daughters torn apart like this." Vivica said, her voice thick with fake emotion. "Jada is the chief executive officer of a company called Onyx Hospitality. They own the venue where Chloe was supposed to get married. We paid our deposits. We signed our contracts in good faith. But Jada maliciously used corporate loopholes to void our contracts at the absolute last minute. She illegally locked the doors and forced the vendors to leave. She extorted us, demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars we do not have just to let the wedding proceed. She humiliated Julian and his family, and she shattered her sister's heart out of pure spite. I sat on my balcony watching them weave this incredible web of deception. They did not mention the racist text message. They did not mention that they were completely bankrupt. They did not mention that I was the one secretly funding the entire wedding out of my own pocket. They painted me as the angry, bitter black woman who could not secure her own ring, so she used her corporate power to crush her sister's fairy tale romance with a wealthy white man. The video had been live for less than 12 hours, and it already had thousands of views. It was circulating rapidly through their social circles, their country club groups, and our extended family networks. I scrolled down to read the comments section. The vitriol was astonishing. Aunts and uncles who had never once congratulated me on my business success were publicly calling me a disgrace. Family friends were writing paragraphs about how toxic and miserable I must be. Strangers were leaving comments calling me a jealous monster. They were eating up the victim narrative exactly as Vivica had planned. But the smear campaign did not stop at personal insults. My mother had deliberately named my company on a public platform. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was actively trying to destroy my livelihood. Right on cue, my secondary business phone began to ring. The caller identification displayed Kendra's name. I answered the call and immediately pulled the phone slightly away from my ear. "Jada, what on earth is happening over there?" Kendra demanded. Her voice was sharp and laced with intense corporate panic. "I have been at the office since 6 in the morning doing damage control. Your mother's video is gaining serious traction. It has been shared in local community groups and business forums." "I know, Kendra," I said calmly, taking a sip of my coffee. "I just finished watching it. Chloe deserves an Academy Award for that crying performance." "This is not a joke, Jada," Kendra snapped. "The public relations fallout is happening right now. People are leaving 1-star reviews on our Google and Yelp business pages. Strangers are calling the corporate office, leaving voicemails calling you an extortionist and a scam artist. They are accusing Onyx Hospitality of unethical business practices. We have 2 major property acquisitions closing next week, and if those investors see this viral video, they might pull out. We need to issue a cease and desist immediately. We need to send a legal takedown notice and threaten them with a defamation lawsuit before this gets any worse." I listened to my brilliant business partner list off the logical corporate defense strategies. She was right to be worried. The damage to our brand could be significant if left unchecked. But sending a quiet legal letter would only give my mother the satisfaction of knowing she had scared me. It would allow them to take the video down quietly and play the victim behind closed doors. "No," I said, my voice completely steady and decisive. "Do not send a cease and desist. Do not contact our lawyers. Do not flag the video for removal." Kendra went dead silent on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing heavily. "Jada, are you out of your mind?" she finally asked. "They are actively destroying your reputation. They are trying to tank our company. Why would we let them keep that video up?" "Because, Kendra," I replied, looking out at the endless blue horizon. "When your enemy is in the middle of making a massive public mistake, you do not interrupt them. You let them commit to the lie. You let them gather the biggest audience possible. Let the video stay up. Let them dig their grave as deep as they possibly can. Let all the extended family members and the country club friends pick their sides and leave their hateful comments." I paused, letting a cold, calculated smile form on my face. Because when I finally release the actual receipts, the explosion is going to be magnificent. They want a public spectacle. I am going to give them one they will never recover from. I heard Kendra exhale a long, heavy breath on the other end of the line. She was a brilliant corporate strategist, and her first instinct was always to strike back immediately to protect our brand. But she trusted my judgment completely. We had built Onyx Hospitality together by outsmarting our competitors and anticipating their moves, not by reacting emotionally to their provocations. I told Kendra to assign our public relations team to strictly monitor the engagement metrics on my mother's video. We needed to let the false narrative saturate the community completely before we made a single move. If we shut it down right now, Vivica would just claim we used our expensive corporate attorneys to silence a heartbroken mother. She would pivot the narrative and play the victim all over again. We had to let them build their entire defense on a foundation of easily disprovable lies. We had to let them rally all their supporters. Kendra agreed with my assessment. She promised to hold the legal team back, and she ordered our media department to keep our corporate pages locked down from any comments. We ended the call, and I placed my phone back on the glass patio table. The notification bell continued to chime in rapid succession. I watched the screen light up with messages from people who shared my blood. An aunt I had not seen in 4 years sent a disgusted message calling me a disgrace to the family name. A cousin who used to borrow my clothes in high school texted to say I was a bitter, lonely woman who would never know true happiness. I did not block them. I did not type out a single reply. I just sat there and let the strategic silence do the heavy lifting. I was gathering the names of every single person who was so eager to believe the absolute worst about me. The vacation was officially over. The peaceful Hawaiian morning suddenly felt like a staging ground for a much larger battle. I walked back into my luxury suite and changed out of my vibrant silk robe. I pulled on a pair of comfortable but sharp travel clothes. It was time to go back to work. I sat down at the heavy mahogany desk in the corner of the room and flipped my laptop open. My mother wanted to weaponize public opinion against me. She wanted to use our community to shame me into submission, just like my father had always done inside the walls of our house. But the internet is a very dangerous place to tell a lie when the person you are lying about holds all the administrative access and the financial receipts. I logged directly into the Onyx Hospitality secure server. I needed to compile an evidence package so absolute and so clinical that it would leave zero room for debate or interpretation. I started with the financial records. I downloaded the original venue contract for Sterling Manor. The document clearly displayed Vivica and Chloe as the primary clients. Right beneath their signatures was the financial addendum. It showed their initial credit card rejections. It showed their complete lack of available funds and their desperate request for a payment plan they could not afford. I saved that PDF file and labeled it as the first exhibit. Next, I pulled my personal banking ledgers. I extracted the certified wire transfer records from the last 6 months. The documents proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had voluntarily moved $150,000 of my own money into the corporate holding account to anonymously sponsor their wedding event. The dates on the transfers aligned perfectly with the exact day my mother had cried to the venue director about her impending bankruptcy. That was the second exhibit. It completely destroyed her viral claim that I was jealous and maliciously trying to sabotage her daughter's wealthy marriage. You do not spend 6 figures to sabotage someone you envy. You spend it to protect them. Finally, I opened my personal messaging archive. I pulled up the high-resolution screenshot I had taken of Chloe's text message. I stared at the words she had sent me just 10 days ago. The text where she explicitly stated that my natural hair, my dark skin, and my loud aesthetic were unfit for Julian's white traditional family. I placed that screenshot right at the top of the digital file. This was the final nail in the coffin. It proved the exact reason the wedding was canceled. It had nothing to do with corporate loopholes or extortion. It was entirely about their own internalized hatred and their desperate colorist need to assimilate into a world that would never truly accept them. I reviewed the digital file one last time. It was a masterpiece of corporate retaliation. There was absolutely no emotion in it. There were no capitalized words or dramatic exclamation points. It was just raw, undeniable data. I compiled the documents into a single secure file and sent it directly to Kendra and our head of public relations with very specific instructions. I wanted the impending press release formatted on official Onyx Hospitality letterhead. I wanted it distributed across every single social media platform where Vivica and Chloe had posted their tearful fabricated video. I closed my laptop and slid it into my leather travel tote. I packed my bags with methodical precision. I did not feel angry anymore. I did not feel sad or betrayed. I felt like a surgeon preparing to excise a massive toxic tumor that had been poisoning my life for 35 years. The resort concierge called my room to inform me that my private car was waiting downstairs. I walked out of the suite and took the elevator down to the lobby. The ride to the airport was smooth and quiet. I watched the beautiful island scenery roll past my window, but my mind was already 3,000 miles away on the mainland. I walked through the terminal and bypassed the long security lines, making my way directly to my departure gate. My phone was still buzzing in my pocket with hate mail. The smear campaign was reaching its absolute peak back home. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought public shame would force me to surrender, step back into the shadows, and apologize for existing. I handed my boarding pass to the gate agent and stepped onto the plane. I settled into my spacious first-class seat and buckled my seatbelt. I was flying back to drop a bomb that would permanently alter the landscape of my family tree. They had asked for a public spectacle, and I was fully prepared to execute a clinical, emotionless takedown they would never recover from. The seatbelt sign chimed and turned off as the plane reached cruising altitude. I ordered a sparkling water from the flight attendant and purchased the premium in-flight internet package. My laptop connected to the network instantly. I opened my secure messaging channel with Kendra. I did not ask for an update or a status report. I simply typed a single word and hit send. Execute. 3,000 miles away in our downtown corporate headquarters, the public relations team pushed the button. There was no shaky camera work. There were no fake tears or dramatic pauses. The retaliation was published across every major social media platform under the official verified accounts of Onyx Hospitality. It was also blasted directly to the local press outlets that had picked up my mother's fabricated story. The post featured our sleek corporate logo at the top, followed by a stark black and white document titled Official Statement Regarding Defamatory Claims and Event Cancellations at Sterling Manor. The statement opened with a clinical explanation. It stated that Onyx Hospitality operates on a foundation of integrity and absolute financial transparency. It calmly explained that due to the severe and malicious nature of the viral video published by Vivica and Chloe, our legal and administrative teams were compelled to release the official event records to protect our corporate reputation. Then came the evidence. Exhibit A was the high-resolution screenshot of Chloe's text message. The PR team did not blur her name or her contact photo. Her exact words were perfectly legible for the entire world to read. The internet was suddenly staring directly at her unapologetic colorism. Everyone could clearly see her stating that my natural hair, my dark skin, and my loud aesthetic were a social liability. Everyone could read her explicitly uninviting me to appease Julian's traditional white family. It completely destroyed her claim that I maliciously canceled the event out of jealousy. Exhibit B was the financial autopsy. It featured the original venue contract clearly displaying Vivica and Chloe's signatures alongside their $0 deposit. Right below that, the team had attached the certified banking ledgers. The documents proved with absolute financial certainty that I had voluntarily wired $150,000 of my own personal funds to anonymously sponsor their wedding. It showed the exact dates the money moved. It proved that they were completely bankrupt and that the angry, bitter black woman they were crying about was actually their sole financial savior. Exhibit C was the absolute final nail. It was an embedded audio file. My team had taken the voicemail Vivica left me right after Chloe sent that text message. The audio player sat right in the middle of the press release. Anyone who clicked it heard my mother's own voice echoing through their speakers. They heard Vivica telling me to stop being difficult and loud. They heard her demanding that I hide my blackness and step aside so Chloe could have her upscale moment. They heard the undeniable proof of decades of emotional abuse and gaslighting straight from the matriarch's mouth. I sat in my spacious first-class seat high above the Pacific Ocean and hit refresh on my browser. The shift in public opinion did not take days or even hours. It happened in a matter of minutes. The same local community groups and extended family networks that had been sharing my mother's tearful video were suddenly confronted with the raw, unedited truth. The corporate statement provided a whiplash so severe it completely shattered their carefully constructed social facade. I watched the engagement metrics skyrocket. 10 comments turned into 100. 100 comments turned into 1,000. The internet is absolutely ruthless when it catches someone in a malicious lie, and they descended upon Chloe and Vivica with terrifying speed. I scrolled through the rapidly updating comment sections. The tide had turned completely. The same people who had called me a monster just an hour ago were now tearing my family apart. People were tagging Chloe, demanding to know how she could take 6 figures from her sister and then insult her skin tone. They were tagging Vivica, calling her a fake wealthy fraud who hated her own daughter. Women from across the country were sharing the post, expressing their absolute disgust at the colorism and the sheer audacity of their lies. They were being dragged through the digital mud. The fake upper-class aesthetic they had maxed out their credit cards to build was completely obliterated. They wanted everyone to look at them. They wanted the spotlight. Now they had the attention of the entire community, but they were standing completely naked in the harsh light of reality. My personal phone began to vibrate in my travel tote. The hate mail I had been receiving all morning suddenly stopped. The incoming messages shifted completely. Aunts and uncles who had cursed my name just hours prior were now sending frantic apologies. They were claiming they had no idea. They were saying they were manipulated by Vivica. They were begging me to forgive them for jumping to conclusions. I did not reply to a single one of them. I swiped their apologies away just as easily as I had swiped away their insults. They had shown me exactly who they were when they thought I was down. An apology born out of public embarrassment meant absolutely nothing to me. I closed my laptop and tucked it safely back into my bag. I leaned my seat back and closed my eyes, letting the steady hum of the plane engines lull me into a state of absolute relaxation. I had handed them the rope, and they had tied the knot themselves. I simply provided the platform for them to hang their own reputations. By the time the plane wheels touched down on the mainland tarmac, the execution was complete. The viral smear campaign was dead. Chloe and Vivica were social pariahs in the very community they had tried to rule. I turned my phone off airplane mode and stepped out of the cabin. I was no longer the discarded daughter. I was returning to my city as the untouchable architect of my own empire, and they were about to realize that the fallout was just beginning. The private car was waiting for me outside the baggage claim. I slid into the leather back seat and let out a long breath. The city streets blurred past my window, but my attention was entirely captured by the glowing screen in my hand. The digital slaughter was in full swing. Our local community is tight-knit and highly critical. The same church aunties and country club socialites who had spent the last year praising my mother and sister for securing a wealthy white husband were now tearing them apart piece by piece. The comment section under the official Onyx hospitality statement was a battlefield, and my family was losing spectacularly. I watched in real time as the social fallout completely buried them. An older cousin who had sent me a vicious text message just that morning publicly commented on the company press release. She wrote that she always knew Vivica was a social climber who would sell her own soul for a designer handbag. People from my sister's former bridal party began posting their own horror stories. They revealed how Chloe had demanded they buy $1,000 bridesmaid dresses while secretly mocking their financial struggles. The hypocrisy was laid bare for everyone to see. My mother and sister had positioned themselves as the pinnacle of Black excellence and refinement. They looked down on anyone who did not meet their strict respectability politics. Now the entire city knew they were nothing but broke colorist frauds who had tried to extort their own flesh and blood. Chloe attempted to do damage control. I saw her post a frantic live video trying to backtrack. She sat in her bedroom crying without tears, claiming her text message was taken out of context. She tried to say she was just worried about cultural differences. It was a pathetic attempt to weaponize social justice language to cover up her own anti-Blackness. The internet saw right through it. The comments flooded in so fast the app could barely load them. People were calling her a disgrace. They were pointing out the exact financial documents proving she was a scam artist. Within 20 minutes of posting that live video, the pressure became absolutely unbearable for her. The backlash was not just local anymore. It was spreading across national blogs. Chloe could not handle the exposure. She could not stomach looking at the ruins of her fake aesthetic. I refreshed the page to see if she had posted another update. The screen flashed white and an error message popped up stating the user could not be found. Chloe had completely deactivated her Instagram account. She deleted her Facebook. She scrubbed her entire digital footprint from the internet. 2 years of meticulously curated content, 2 years of faking a luxury lifestyle, and 2 years of pretending she was better than me were permanently erased in a single afternoon. She had banished herself to the very shadows she had tried to force me into. I arrived at the Onyx Hospitality corporate headquarters just as the afternoon sun began to dip behind the city skyline. I walked through the glass double doors of our lobby, and the receptionist gave me a wide, knowing smile. I took the private elevator up to the executive floor. Kendra was waiting for me in my office holding a thick manila folder and wearing an expression of pure absolute triumph. "You are never going to believe what just hit the legal wire," Kendra said, tossing the folder onto my heavy oak desk. "I told you letting them dig their own grave was a good idea, but I did not realize they were going to dig it straight to the center of the earth." I sat down in my chair and opened the folder. The documents inside had nothing to do with my company. They were public court filings that our legal team had just pulled from the county database. Julian had not just walked away from the wedding. He had gone straight back to his hotel and told his parents every single detail of the deception. His family was old New England money. They did not become wealthy by letting people steal from them. And Vivica had made a massive, fatal mistake. 6 months ago, Julian's parents had written a check for $50,000. They gave it directly to my mother, specifically designating the funds to cover the deposits for the luxury wedding photographer, the videography team, and the elite live band. They trusted her to manage those specific vendor contracts. I read through the legal filings and the truth became glaringly obvious. Vivica did not pay those vendors. She had taken that $50,000 check and deposited it directly into her own personal account. She used Julian's family money to lease a new Mercedes SUV. She used it to buy the designer clothes she and Chloe wore to their country club brunches. She used it to fund the very illusion she was selling to them. She assumed she could just put the actual vendor deposits on a credit card later, but her credit had completely tanked. Julian's father had immediately unleashed his corporate attorneys. They were initiating a massive civil lawsuit against Calvin and Vivica for fraud, breach of contract, and grand larceny. They were demanding the immediate return of their $50,000 plus legal fees and damages. They were going to place a lien on my parents' house. My parents were already drowning in consumer debt. They had zero savings. They had completely ruined their social standing. And now they were facing a devastating lawsuit from a highly connected, wealthy family that would absolutely bankrupt them and potentially send my mother to prison for fraud. The walls were closing in from every single direction. I closed the manila folder and leaned back in my chair. The quiet hum of the city traffic drifted up through my office windows. The storm I had predicted had finally made landfall, and it was wiping them off the map. My desk phone buzzed. It was a call from the ground floor security desk. I pressed the speaker button. "Go ahead," I said. "Ms. Williams," the security guard said, his voice tight with professional concern. "Your father is down here in the lobby. He bypassed the front desk and tried to force his way onto the executive elevators. We have him detained right now, but he is demanding to see you. He says it is a family emergency and he is not leaving until you come down or let him up." I looked at Kendra. She raised an eyebrow, silently asking if she should call the police. I shook my head. Calvin had lost his golden child's wedding. He had lost his social standing. He was staring down the barrel of a crippling lawsuit. He was totally stripped of his power, and he was trying to use brute physical intimidation to force me into saving him. "Send him up," I told the security guard. "But send 2 officers up with him." I smoothed my hands over my desk. It was time to put the final nail in the coffin. The heavy frosted glass doors of my executive suite swung open. 2 of my uniformed security guards stepped through first, flanking the entrance, with their hands resting comfortably at their sides. Then my father walked into the room. For my entire life, Calvin had been a towering figure of absolute patriarchal authority. He was a man who demanded respect through pure intimidation and volume. He expected the women in his house to bow their heads and follow his directives without question. But the man standing in front of my desk right now looked completely broken. His broad shoulders were slumped. His expensive golf polo was wrinkled and stained with sweat at the collar. His eyes were bloodshot and darting frantically around the room. The arrogant country club patriarch was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate cornered animal. Kendra stood up from her chair. She gave me a silent, reassuring nod before stepping out of the office, leaving the two security guards stationed firmly by the door. Calvin stared at me. He looked at the massive mahogany desk, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown skyline, and the pristine corporate environment I had built from the ground up. He swallowed hard, taking in the sheer magnitude of the wealth he had spent years dismissing as little freelance gigs. He was finally standing inside the empire he had mocked, and the realization was clearly suffocating him. "Jada, you need to take that post down right now," Calvin demanded, but his voice lacked its usual booming power. It sounded thin and reedy, shaking with poorly concealed panic. "You have made your point. You humiliated your sister. You humiliated your mother. But this lawsuit from Julian's family is going to destroy us. They are demanding $50,000 by the end of the week, or Julian's father is going to file criminal fraud charges against Vivica. They are going to put a lien on the house." I leaned back in my leather executive chair and crossed my arms. I did not offer him a seat. I let him stand there in the center of my office, exactly like a subordinate reporting to a superior. Vivica stole $50,000 from Julian's parents. I stated calmly, my voice cutting through the quiet room. She took money explicitly designated for wedding vendors and used it to lease a luxury car and buy designer clothes so she could pretend to be rich. I did not humiliate her dad. The truth humiliated her. I just provided the documentation. We were just trying to keep up appearances. Calvin pleaded, taking a step closer to my desk. We were trying to secure Chloe's future. You do not understand the pressure of moving in those circles. But you have the money, Jada. We saw the bank ledgers you posted. You have more than enough liquid capital to make this lawsuit go away. I need you to write a check to Julian's father and settle this before your mother ends up in a federal courtroom. You have to fix this right now. I looked at the man who had spent 35 years making me feel like an ugly inconvenience. He was actually standing in my corporate headquarters demanding that I use my hard-earned money to bail his colorist wife out of a grand larceny charge. The sheer audacity of his entitlement was breathtaking. He had watched my mother and my sister tear me down for my dark skin and my natural hair. He had actively participated in my erasure to protect their proximity to whiteness. And now he expected me to open my wallet to shield them from the consequences of their own spectacular greed. "I am not writing you a check," I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "I am not saving your house. I am not saving Vivica from prison. I am not fixing a single thing." Calvin's face flushed dark red. The desperation quickly morphed back into that familiar toxic anger he used whenever he lost control of a situation. He slammed his hand down on the edge of my mahogany desk, causing my coffee cup to rattle against its saucer. "I am your father," Calvin roared, his voice finally finding its old, terrifying volume. "You owe this family respect. We gave you everything. We put a roof over your head and fed you. You are going to call your bank and you are going to pay that settlement. You do not get to sit up here in this fancy glass tower and turn your back on your own blood. We are your family." I did not flinch. I did not shrink away. I sat perfectly still, looking him dead in the eye. "You are not my family," I replied, my voice dropping into a deadly quiet register that commanded the entire room. "You are just a man who shares my DNA. Family does not tell their daughter to hide her natural hair because it is too aggressive. Family does not tell their darkest child to stay in the shadows so the lighter child can shine. For 3 decades, you told me to make myself smaller. You told me my blackness was a liability. You stood by and watched Vivica and Chloe treat me like a dirty secret, and you actively participated in my erasure just to impress a wealthy white family you thought was better than us." Calvin opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off completely, holding my hand up to silence him. "And now you want the very same thick, loud, unapologetic black money you were so ashamed of to save you from social and financial ruin." I continued, leaning forward over the desk. "You wanted a refined, traditional high society life without me. Now you get to face the high society lawsuits without me, too." The reality of my words hit him like a physical blow. He realized in that exact moment that the power dynamic had permanently shifted. He could not bully me. He could not guilt-trip me into submission. He had absolutely nothing left to leverage. He was just a broke, fraudulent man standing in the office of a chief executive officer he had severely underestimated his entire life. "You are a cold, bitter woman, Jada." Calvin spat his fists, trembling at his sides as his breathing grew ragged. "You are going to die completely alone with all your money." Calvin took another aggressive step forward, raising his hand and pointing his finger directly at my face. He leaned his upper body over my desk, attempting to use his physical size to force my submission one last time. He wanted to intimidate me back into the obedient little girl who used to cower at his booming voice. But I was not that little girl anymore. I reached my hand under the heavy wooden lip of my desk. I slid my finger over the smooth plastic casing of the silent panic button and pressed down hard. The response to the silent alarm was immediate. Before my father could even finish his physical intimidation tactic, the heavy frosted glass doors of my executive suite swung violently open. 2 massive security guards stepped into the room. I had hired these men specifically for their uncompromising professionalism and their ability to de-escalate hostile corporate environments. They did not ask questions. They did not hesitate. They moved with practiced efficiency, stepping directly between my mahogany desk and my furious father. Calvin froze completely. The intimidating, booming patriarch who had ruled our household through fear for my entire life was suddenly halted in his tracks. His hand, which had been pointing aggressively at my face, dropped slowly to his side. He looked at the 2 large men flanking him, and the reality of his powerlessness washed over his features. In the real world outside the toxic bubble of our family dynamic, he was not a king. He was just a hostile visitor, trespassing in the corporate headquarters of a highly successful business owner. I opened the top drawer of my desk with calm, deliberate movements. I pulled out a single sheet of paper printed on the official heavy cardstock of Onyx Hospitality. I had instructed my corporate legal team to draft this document the absolute second my flight landed on the mainland. I stood up, smoothing the front of my tailored blazer, and walked around the side of my desk. I did not hand the paper directly to Calvin. I handed it to the lead security guard who held it out for my father to read. It was a formal, legally binding notice of trespass. Calvin stared at the bold black ink at the top of the page. His eyes darted from the legal document up to my face. The shock radiating from him was palpable. In our community, calling security on your own parents is considered the ultimate unforgivable disrespect. It is a massive cultural taboo to involve authorities in family business. But Calvin and Vivica had spent decades weaponizing those exact cultural expectations to keep me trapped as their obedient punching bag. They demanded my loyalty while treating my dark skin and my natural hair like a disease. I was completely done playing by rules designed to destroy me. "This building belongs to my company," I told him, my voice echoing clearly through the quiet office. "You do not have the right to barge into my workspace. You do not have the right to demand my resources to clean up a catastrophic financial mess that you and your wife created. Sharing blood with me does not entitle you to my peace, my finances, or my life." "Jada, you cannot be serious," Calvin stammered. His voice had lost all of its previous terrifying volume. "You are putting a legal ban on your own father over a wedding dispute. You are taking this way too far." "This is not about a wedding dispute, Dad," I replied, looking him dead in the eye. "This is about 35 years of emotional abuse. This is about you sitting silently while Vivica taught Chloe to hate the very blackness that runs through all of our veins. You wanted a refined high society aesthetic so badly that you let them treat me like a dirty secret. You chose your proximity to whiteness over your eldest daughter. You chose your country club image over my humanity. So I am making a permanent choice too. I chose my peace and we are completely done." I watched him swallow hard. He tried to pull back his shoulders, attempting one last desperate play at paternal authority. "You are going to regret this," he warned, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and bitter resentment. "When you cut off your family, you end up with nothing. You are going to be a very lonely woman." "I am not lonely," I corrected him. "I am just finally taking out the trash. If you or Vivica or Chloe step foot within 500 feet of my corporate properties or my personal residence, my security team has strict orders to involve the police immediately. You are officially excised from my life. I gave a brief nod to the security guards. They stepped closer to Calvin politely, but firmly instructing him to turn around and walk toward the elevators. My father looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. There was no fatherly affection or remorse for the pain he had caused. There was only the furious, calculating realization that he had permanently lost his financial savior. He had lost the one person capable of writing a check large enough to save him from the devastating civil lawsuit Julian's family was currently preparing to file. He turned around and walked out of my office. The heavy glass doors slid shut behind him, sealing the room in perfect, absolute silence. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the busy city street below. A few minutes later, I saw Calvin emerge from the building lobby. He looked incredibly small as he walked down the sidewalk toward his heavily financed luxury vehicle. He was driving back to a house he was about to lose, heading back to a wife who had squandered their entire future to impress people who did not even care about them. I stood there waiting for the guilt to hit me. I waited for that familiar heavy ache of familial obligation to settle into my chest. But it never came. I did not feel a single drop of sadness. I did not feel conflicted. I only felt the incredible, magnificent lightness of a massive anchor finally being severed from my neck. I could finally breathe. I walked back to my desk and sat down in my comfortable leather chair. I took a deep cleansing breath of the quiet air in my office. The toxic cycle was officially broken. Suddenly, my computer monitor chimed with a high-priority notification. I glanced at the screen. An email had just bypassed my administrative filter and landed directly in my personal inbox. The sender name displayed was Chloe. The subject line read simply, "Please Jada, we need to talk because I want to fix things." I stared at the high-resolution monitor on my desk. The notification banner hovered in the top right corner of the screen, displaying Chloe's name like a ghost refusing to leave a haunted house. The subject line was a desperate plea for a private meeting to fix things. Just an hour ago, I had security escort our father out of the building. Now the golden child was trying her hand at securing a financial bailout. I reached out and clicked the mouse. The email expanded, filling my screen with paragraphs of frantic, chaotic text. I leaned back in my leather chair and read her words carefully. I was looking for a single ounce of genuine accountability. I was looking for an actual apology for the decades of colorism, the blatant anti-blackness, and the sheer cruelty she had inflicted upon me. Instead, I found a masterclass in manipulation and deflected blame. "Jada, please, you have to listen to me," Chloe wrote. "I was just under so much pressure with the wedding planning. Julian's mother is so particular, and Vivica was in my ear every single day telling me everything had to be absolutely flawless. I was not in my right mind when I sent that text message. I was just stressed out and acting like a crazy bridezilla. I did not mean what I said about your hair or your style. You know I love you. Please call Julian and tell him you forgive me. He will not even look at me. His parents are suing Mom and Dad, and we are going to lose everything. You proved your point, Jada. You won. Please just help us fix this before my entire life is destroyed." I read the email a second time. My heart did not ache for her. My pulse remained perfectly steady. The email was a glaring neon sign pointing to the exact reason I had to walk away. She did not apologize for her racism. She blamed wedding stress. She did not take responsibility for erasing my humanity. She blamed Julian's mother and Vivica. She was entirely incapable of acknowledging that the ugliness lived inside of her. She was only sorry that her racist text message had been exposed to the very people she was trying to impress. She was sorry that Julian saw the monster lurking beneath her elegant aesthetic. She was sorry that she was facing a devastating lawsuit and absolute social ruin. She said I had proved my point and that I had won. But she completely missed the reality of the situation. This was not a game. I was not trying to win a competition against her. I was simply refusing to participate in my own destruction. I was refusing to fund a family that demanded I shrink myself to make them comfortable. For 35 years, I had been the designated shock absorber for this family. I had taken their insults, their casual cruelty, and their relentless demands for assimilation. I had let them treat my dark skin like a burden. I had given them my time, my energy, and my hard-earned money, hoping that one day they would wake up and love me the way I loved them. But staring at Chloe's empty, desperate email, I finally accepted the absolute truth. They were never going to change. They were fundamentally broken people who built their self-worth on the subjugation of others. They would drain me completely dry and then complain that I did not bleed fast enough. Closure is a concept we are taught to chase. We are told we need one final conversation, one tearful apology, one grand moment of mutual understanding to truly heal. But as I sat in my pristine corporate office, I realized that closure is something you can just give to yourself. You do not need the people who broke you to sign off on your healing. I moved my cursor over the top of the screen. I did not hit reply. I did not type out a lengthy explanation of why her apology was insufficient. I did not give her the satisfaction of my anger or my engagement. I simply clicked the small trash can icon. The email vanished from my inbox. I picked up my personal cell phone from the desk. I opened my contacts list. I navigated to Vivica's profile. I pressed block. I navigated to Calvin's profile. I pressed block. Finally, I navigated to Chloe's profile. I looked at the contact photo of my smiling, lighter-skinned sister, the woman who had sold out her own blood for a country club wedding that never even happened. I pressed block. I opened my social media applications and repeated the process. I systematically severed every single digital tie connecting me to the people who had poisoned my life. I locked them out of my world completely and permanently. There would be no more fake holiday dinners. There would be no more passive-aggressive phone calls. There would be no more frantic demands for financial bailouts. I was fully excising the infection. When I set the phone back down on my mahogany desk, the silence in the room felt entirely different. It was no longer the heavy, tense silence of an impending battle. It was the clear, crisp quiet of a slate being wiped completely clean. The toxic family dynamics that had governed my existence were officially dead and buried. The frosted glass door to my office opened softly. Kendra stepped inside holding a fresh stack of acquisition files and 2 cups of hot coffee. She looked at my face, studying my expression for any lingering signs of distress after my father's hostile invasion. She set the coffee down on my desk. "Are we secure?" Kendra asked, her voice holding a note of gentle concern. "We are perfectly secure," I replied, picking up the warm cup. "The perimeter is clear." Kendra smiled, a bright, genuine expression that reached all the way to her eyes. "Good," she said, taking a seat in the chair across from my desk. "Because the sellers for the downtown luxury high-rise just caved on the closing costs. They are ready to sign the transfer documents by Friday. We have a new property to integrate into the portfolio, and I need my chief executive officer fully present." I took a sip of the rich, dark coffee. I looked around my beautiful office and then out the window at the sprawling city I was helping to build. I had spent so much time trying to fix a family that did not want to be fixed. Now I had all that energy, all that passion, and all that fierce, unapologetic drive to pour directly back into my own empire. I opened the acquisition file Kendra had placed in front of me. "Pull up the architectural blueprints," I told her, my voice ringing with absolute authority and genuine excitement. "Let us get to work." 6 months passed in an absolute blur of corporate expansion and massive profit margins. The winter frost melted away, revealing a bright and bustling spring across the city. Onyx Hospitality was operating at an entirely new level. The acquisition of the downtown luxury high-rise had been a monumental success. Kendra and I were securing contracts that previously seemed entirely out of reach. My professional life was thriving, and my personal peace was completely undisturbed. I kept my promise to myself. I kept my family permanently blocked. I did not search for their names on social media. I did not ask around the community to see how they were doing. I starved them of my attention and focused entirely on my own growth. But in a city where social circles overlap and real estate is the primary currency, you do not have to look for news. The news eventually finds its way to your desk. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Kendra walked into my office holding a stack of regional property transfer reports. We monitored these reports weekly to track market trends and keep an eye on potential investment opportunities. She tossed the thick packet onto my mahogany desk and tapped her manicured fingernail against a specific highlighted line on the second page. I think you might want to look at the recent short sales in the northern suburbs, Kendra said, taking a seat across from me. Her voice carried a tone of quiet disbelief. I just got off the phone with a broker who handles liquidations for the major banks. The gossip is spreading through the financial district like wildfire. I looked down at the highlighted text. It was the address of the sprawling house I grew up in. The property had just been sold in a desperate rush for a fraction of its market value. The seller names listed on the transfer document were Vivica and Calvin. I leaned back in my chair and looked at Kendra. What happened? I asked, my voice completely steady. Julian and his family did not play any games, Kendra explained. His father unleashed a team of ruthless corporate attorneys. They filed a massive civil lawsuit against your parents for fraud and grand larceny regarding that $50,000 vendor deposit. They had a mountain of undeniable evidence. They had bank statements proving your mother deposited their check directly into her personal account. They had receipts showing she spent their money on a luxury car lease and designer clothes. I listened as the reality of their destruction was laid bare. Your parents were terrified of facing a federal judge, Kendra continued. They knew Vivica would be facing actual prison time for embezzlement if it went to trial, so they begged for a settlement. Julian's family agreed to drop the criminal charges, but they demanded full, immediate restitution plus extensive legal fees. Your parents had absolutely no liquid capital. They had to drain whatever tiny retirement accounts they had left. When that was not enough, they were forced to sell the house at a massive loss just to keep your mother out of a jail cell. I stared at the address on the paper. The fortress of my childhood, the place where I was constantly told to make myself smaller, was officially gone. The credit card companies caught wind of the lawsuit and swooped in right after, Kendra said softly. They garnished whatever pennies were left from the house sale. Your parents are completely bankrupt, Jada. The broker told me they are currently renting a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a complex on the far west side of the city. It is in the exact same neighborhood your father used to mock when he was pretending to be wealthy. I processed the information slowly. There was a time when hearing this would have triggered a deep sense of guilt. I would have felt obligated to rush in and write a check to save them from their own reckless choices. But sitting in my pristine office surrounded by the empire I built with my own 2 hands, I felt absolutely nothing but a calm, rational acceptance. They had built a life entirely on deception, and the foundation had finally caved in. And what about Chloe? I asked, keeping my eyes on the document. Kendra let out a heavy sigh. Chloe's entire social circle dropped her the exact second that viral post exposed her lies. The country club women she tried so desperately to impress completely ostracized her. Without Julian's name or your hidden financial backing, she had absolutely no way to maintain her fake upper-class illusion. She could not afford the brunches. She could not afford the aesthetic. She became a social ghost overnight. Kendra paused for a moment before delivering the final piece of reality. I actually saw her yesterday. I was walking through the mid-level retail district downtown, picking up a gift for a client. I looked through the glass window of one of those fast fashion department stores. Chloe was working there. She was wearing a cheap polyester store uniform, folding sweaters on a clearance table. I watched a customer yell at her over a return policy, and she just stood there and took it. She looked completely defeated. I looked out my office window at the bustling city below. Chloe had explicitly told me that my natural hair and my loud aesthetic were socially unfit for her elegant country club wedding. She wanted to be a wealthy, polished socialite so badly that she sold out her own sister. Now she was folding cheap sweaters in a uniform stripped of every single designer label she had charged to her mother's stolen credit cards. She wanted to live in a world of high society and status, But she ended up right back at the bottom, completely isolated from the elite circles she had worshipped. I realized in that quiet moment that the universe has a remarkable way of balancing the scales. You do not always have to fight your enemies. You do not have to scream or argue or plot elaborate schemes to destroy the people who hurt you. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is simply remove your protection and let them face the natural consequences of their own actions. I did not ruin my family. I did not destroy their reputation or steal their wealth. They did all of that entirely on their own. I just stopped paying the bill for their illusion. I closed the property transfer report and handed the folder back to Kendra. The best revenge was not a screaming match or a bitter confrontation. The absolute best revenge was just living my life in total peace and letting them destroy themselves with their own terrible choices. The following year moved with a fierce, relentless momentum. When you excise a toxic tumor from your life, your body finally has the energy to thrive. That is exactly what happened to my company. The viral statement I released did not just destroy my family's fake aesthetic. It accidentally became the greatest marketing campaign Onyx Hospitality ever had. The corporate world respects a leader who operates with absolute transparency and a spine of steel. High net worth clients saw how clinical and uncompromising I was when dealing with financial fraud. They realized that if I demanded that level of accountability from my own blood, I would protect their investments with the exact same ferocity. Our client acquisition rates skyrocketed almost overnight. Investors who previously ignored our proposals were suddenly blowing up my administrative inbox requesting meetings. Kendra and I barely had time to sleep, but we loved every single second of the grind. We expanded our portfolio far beyond Sterling Manor. By late autumn, we successfully acquired 2 massive new luxury properties. One was a historic boutique hotel in the heart of downtown, completely revitalized with modern architecture but keeping its original soul. The other was a sprawling coastal resort that catered to international elites looking for privacy and high-end service. I walked through those grand spaces, running my hands over imported marble and custom woodwork, knowing that I owned every single inch. I was no longer hiding my wealth to make small-minded people comfortable. I was taking up as much space as I possibly could. My bank accounts were multiplying, and my professional reputation was absolutely untouchable. When the holiday season finally rolled around, the city was blanketed in a crisp white snow. In the past, the holidays meant shrinking myself. They meant sitting at my parents' dining table enduring backhanded compliments about my weight, my hair, and my relationship status. They meant watching Chloe open lavish, expensive gifts while I received generic gift cards and subtle reminders that I was a disappointment. I decided to rewrite that narrative entirely. I hosted a massive holiday dinner at my own private estate. My home was not decorated in the sterile, cold white aesthetic my mother and sister obsessed over. My home was filled with rich, warm tones, deep emerald greens, heavy velvet textures, and vibrant artwork created by Black artists. I did not invite a single person out of obligation. I only invited people who fed my soul. The dining room was filled with the rich, savory scents of roasted turkey, candied yams, baked macaroni and cheese, and spiced greens. The sound of classic rhythm and blues played softly through the surround sound speakers. The music was loud, but the laughter was even louder. Kendra was sitting at the head of the long wooden table, holding up a glass of expensive champagne. She was telling a hilarious story about a ridiculous real estate broker we had just crushed in a negotiation earlier that week. My mentor, David, a brilliant older Black architect who had guided me through my early 20s, was sitting across from her, clapping his hands in amusement. Several other close friends and business associates filled the remaining seats. I looked around the room at the gorgeous array of dark-skinned natural hair and unapologetic joy. Every single person sitting at that table was successful, driven, and deeply supportive. We wore bold, bright colors. We spoke our minds freely without the fear of being tone-policed. We celebrated each other without a single ounce of jealousy or hidden agendas. This was my chosen family. They did not care about proximity to whiteness or faking a country club persona. They cared about authenticity and mutual respect. They loved me for my loud laugh and my uncompromising boundaries. The evening stretched on warm and beautiful. As the dessert plates were being cleared away, the room settled into a comfortable, cozy lull. People were leaning back in their chairs, sipping their wine, and enjoying the perfect, peaceful atmosphere. Kendra leaned over, resting her chin on her hand, and looked at me. The firelight from the massive stone fireplace was dancing in the background, casting a soft golden glow across the room. She lowered her voice so it would not carry over the music. "Jada," she asked, her tone completely genuine, "the holidays are always heavy when you go through a massive life transition. Tell me the truth. Do you miss them at all? Do you miss your parents or Chloe tonight?" The conversation at the table seemed to naturally quiet down right at that moment. A year ago, I might have felt a twinge of sorrow. I might have mourned the family I always wished I had. But I looked at the incredible community I had built around me. I looked at the empire I commanded and the absolute peace settling deep in my bones. I took a slow sip of my wine. I looked back at Kendra and a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. I looked at Kendra and a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. I shook my head, letting out a soft laugh that carried no bitterness. "No, Kendra." I told her, my voice steady and completely certain. "I do not miss them at all. I do not miss shrinking myself to make them comfortable. I do not miss apologizing for my dark skin or my natural hair. I do not miss funding their illusions or acting as the designated shock absorber for their massive insecurities." The table fell into a comfortable, peaceful silence. My friends nodded, understanding the profound weight of that truth. I took a sip of my wine and let my gaze drift toward the crackling stone fireplace. My mind wandered back to that Tuesday afternoon in my home office. It felt like an entire lifetime ago. I remembered sitting in my leather chair, staring at my phone screen, reading the exact words my sister had typed to erase me from her life. She had told me my thick vibe and my unapologetic blackness were socially unfit for her pristine country club aesthetic. She thought she was handing me a life sentence of humiliation and isolation. She thought by uninviting me, she was securing her own elevated future while keeping me permanently locked in the shadows. Looking back, I realized that text message was the absolute greatest gift Chloe could have ever given me. If she had not sent those hateful, racist words, I would have kept the corporate sponsorship active. I would have quietly paid the $150,000 venue bill out of my own private accounts. I would have put on a muted pastel dress, straightened my hair, and sat in the back of the reception hall trying to be invisible so they could play their high society games. I would have continued to pour my hard-earned wealth into a family that viewed my very existence as a massive inconvenience. By trying to exclude me, Chloe accidentally handed me the exact key I needed to unlock my own prison cell. She forced me to confront the harsh, undeniable reality that conditional love is not love at all. It is just a transaction. And once I recognized it was a business transaction, I simply closed the account. I stopped paying the emotional and financial tolls required to cross their bridge. I think about my parents sometimes. I think about how hard they fought to maintain a polished, acceptable facade for a wealthy white family that did not even care about their performance. They sacrificed their actual flesh and blood daughter to protect an imaginary reputation. They lost their beautiful suburban home, their elevated social standing, and their golden child's fairy tale marriage because they were too blinded by internalized colorism and sheer greed to see the value in the person standing right in front of them. They wanted to assimilate so desperately that they completely lost their own souls in the process. I refuse to make that same mistake. My life today is a direct result of that permanent severance. Onyx Hospitality is breaking revenue records because I am no longer distracted by the relentless demands of a toxic family dynamic. I am leading my corporate team with a level of clarity and ruthless precision that I never had access to when I was constantly carrying the heavy burden of my parents' constant disapproval. My success is loud. It is vibrant. It is rooted deeply in the very culture my mother and sister tried so hard to wash away. I wake up every single morning in a beautiful, sprawling estate that I purchased with my own quiet wealth. I surround myself with people who celebrate my ambition rather than feeling threatened by it. I do not have to filter my voice or dial down my personality to fit into spaces that were never designed for me. I build my own spaces, I buy my own buildings, I set my own rules. People often talk about the importance of family loyalty. We are conditioned from childhood to believe that sharing DNA means you have to endure endless disrespect just to keep the peace. We are taught to beg for a seat at the table, even when the people sitting across from us are actively trying to starve us. We are expected to swallow our pride and turn the other cheek when our own relatives tear us down. But I learned the hard way that true power is not fighting for a seat. True power is walking away from tables where respect is no longer being served. You cannot heal in the same toxic environment that broke you, and you certainly cannot thrive while financing the very people who despise your reflection. You have to be willing to pack your bags, withdraw your safety net, and let them face the natural consequences of their own cruelty. I raised my glass of champagne. The crystal caught the warm firelight, reflecting the beautiful faces of my chosen family. They raised their glasses in return, offering a silent toast to peace, to growth, and to the absolute beauty of walking away. I took a drink, feeling the cool, crisp liquid slide down my throat. The storm was completely over. The wreckage of my past had been cleared away, and I had built an untouchable fortress of joy in its place. Listen up, honey, because as your favorite AI assistant, I am here to give it to you straight. The ultimate lesson from Alyssa's journey is that true value is not always obvious to those who only look at the surface. When toxic family members underestimate your worth and prioritize their own greed, the absolute sweetest revenge is holding your ground and quietly building your empire. She transformed a worthless warehouse into a multi-million-dollar tech hub, proving that having the vision to see potential beats entitlement. Never let anyone manipulate your boundaries or steal your future. Have you ever had someone underestimate what you valued most, only to prove them wrong in the end? Share your story in the comments below.